quite there yet. I hope I didn't scare you away, Rhea. Anyway.
Oh, I listened to every word. It was fascinating.
Yep. I have had a fascinating life. There's no doubt about that. Okay, so we are on YouTube and we have one listener at the moment. So let me summarize what it is we're doing here with this series of sessions on Monday nights. What we're doing is taking the cards of the tarot one by one and discussing them in great detail. Now, the reason this is significant is that the tarot cards have not changed in 600 years. And the reason they haven't changed in 600 years is because they are true. And what they do is that, particularly in the major arcana, they point to archetypal forces that exist in every human being's life. They have always existed in every human being's life, and they always will. And so if you understand these major arcana, then you're going to understand something about your life and how you have to deal with it. And that will help you from a psychological development point of view. And so that's why we're doing it. And so tonight we have one of everybody's favorite topics, the devil card. And so first of all, I want to give my panelists the opportunity to go around the room and talk about the devil card from their point of view in a couple of minutes, just a summary, and then we're going to come back and look at some specific cards. So Samantha, you want to go first?
Actually, can I collect my thoughts here?
Sure. Okay.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Okay. Let's see. All right, Jordan, go ahead. I'm sure you have lots to say, but this is just the short summation.
Yeah, I'll play the Cliff Notes version. I think the most important thing I'd like to lead in with is that the devil card on the tarot is not Satan. It's more Pan, a half-goat deity. And that in one sense you've referred to as the shadow. It's also the ego in its various forms of evolution. Goat being base ego, and as well as then sovereignty, which would be an evolved ego. What I find most interesting is that the devil card in a negative way could be indicative of addictions, but more importantly, inhibitions, which enslave actually more toxically and easily, for example, than addictions, because they're hidden. So there's one of the trickster pieces there behind even addiction with the devil. Then on the other turn point of that, I would say it's about intense earthly desires, things that are your most natural talents that have been developed from things that are enriching. So it has a both negative and positive, of course, spectrum. And I find it important that they almost always function as the shadow of the other. It's just a kind of in and out Cliff Notes for a starter.
Okay. Let's see, Raquel, would you like to say something about the devil card?
I agree with Jordan with most what he said, but I would add the idea that the desire that the devil card represents is also something that a person was taught to be ashamed of and to kind of repress it. Like I have this experience of the devil card as being not only the shadow and the aspects of addiction of some sorts, or even abusive relationships, because the devil usually for me represents not only the shadow, but the shadow that is projected onto something as someone else or a relationship, but also something that is a part of a core of our personality, that we have learned to hate somehow, unfortunately. So that's
Okay.
kind of it for now.
Oh, okay. So Nancy Bennett Karzik,
Yes.
do you have some thoughts about the
Yes, I have. This time I'm not the deer in the headlights. All I can think of is we've been dealing with the devil for the last 4 years, but it has helped illuminate what the values that we abhor. So it illuminates the values that we hold. Hopefully, many of us hold, and it brings contrast to goodness. I think it illuminates things that we hate and that we also value. And I think a lot of us have come to realize the values that have been missing for the last 4 years in this administration. And hopefully people are waking up to that.
Sure. Rhea, do you want to talk about the devil card?
I can just say a couple sentences. I like to compare it to the Lovers card. And I think of, in the Lovers card, the feminine is looking up into the more enlightened self, or the, we can call it different things there, but it's angelic, it's golden, it's enlightened. And then the masculine is taking in from the feminine. So you have the, but in the devil card, she's just looking straight out, and they've got their chains on, and it's, for me, when I see it, the first word that comes to mind is just ignorance, in the root sense of the word ignore.
Mhm.
So that's enough on that for me, probably.
Okay. Let's see. Who else do we have? Nicole, do you want to say something about the devil?
Not really. I'm a bit overwhelmed by this card and what's coming through. It's just interesting information, and just,
Yeah. Okay.
yeah, it definitely connotes relationships because the two figures are at the bottom. But it's about the polarities as well. And I like the reference to the Lovers. That's really interesting.
Yeah. That's mentioned in a lot of books. And before I turn it over to Nick here, I'll just mention a couple of things that come to my mind. First of all, many of the people that have done decks have referred to this as the shadow rather than the devil. And what we have to understand from Jungian psychology is that not all things in the shadow are bad. Okay. And in fact, most of them are good. And one of the points about the devil card, and what I'm going to do is share my screen, and I'll just point this out, and then I'll let Nick do his piece because he wants to talk about two cards together. But one of the points about the devil card is that the chains on the individuals in the devil card are loose, and they mean that you can escape from them. You're not stuck. You can walk away from the devil. You can turn your back on him. And so, yes, I consider the last 4 years a very graphic presentation of the American shadow to the world. And I'm very hopeful that we'll get beyond that. But in any case, Nick, your turn. And these are the cards you wanted to compare, I think. So
yeah, before I dig in here, do you have anything you want to say, Samantha? I see that you raised your hand.
Oh, thank you. Yes, I do. So I also got visuals. So the first thing is my personal experience with this card. I haven't drawn this card often when I've been from a divination standpoint for myself. However, I did have an interesting experience drawing this card in a reading for another person. And I'll get to that in a sec. But first, I'll just get more to my understanding of fixed meanings. You know, to piggyback on what everyone said, absolutely, about addiction and the shadow. In terms of my personal beliefs, so I belong to the Church of Religious Science, which has the point of view that there is no devil. So what everyone was saying is interesting to me. Like, it's about a false faith in evil, that we actually, it's a type of faith, like we decide to believe in this negative thing, and that can be difficult, I'll say, on a personal level to reckon with, because it is important to be aware of this evil, the shadow, whatever it is. It benefits us to treat it as reality, you know, so that we're not doing a spiritual bypass or being too passive, right, in the world in matters of justice. I'll wrap up in a sec, but what I wanted to say is that just that I find that idea really interesting, and that I was speaking with the Reverend.
I'm getting some microphone interference. Is everybody else hearing that?
Yeah, me too.
Can you hear me better now?
We can hear you. Let's all mute and just let Samantha go and see if we...
Thank you. So what I was saying is about integration. You guys were talking on an individual level about how do we integrate our shadow, or that's what I take it Jung would want us to do. So that to me has something to do with, like, my Reverend made a good point. I'm from a very liberal place, Oakland, California. And someone was asking her, well, how can you say evil doesn't exist when there's these things that happen? And they even were referring to Trump, you know, this injustice. And she actually flipped it around and she said, well, who but Trump could unite us? You know, by showing us what we do not want to have. And when I say we, I mean the majority of the country, because, you know, he was not voted for at this time. So that's another way of thinking of it. The other thing,
that's a fair observation about the shadow too.
She really helped me just orient myself, because sometimes it's hard to see the love in someone who you dislike. But the idea in Science of Mind is that everything is God and everyone is God to some degree. So there's something good. Only good can come from even Trump. But we have to orient ourselves to it. Anyway, there's that. And then the other thing I want to say before I hand it off to Nick is actually two things. One is that I've been working with the Melanated Tarot, and there's a lot of storytelling in these to have you understand the meanings of the cards. And so I find it very interesting, and you guys were talking about the difference between the devil and the lover. They're similar themes, but right, opposites of each other. Is the person who made the deck talks about, compares the devil card to an unhappy marriage. That it's about obligations we've made that we actually, our heart isn't really in it, which is just interesting and new to me. I don't have a lot of experience with that, but and to me that has something to do with the lovers have choice, whereas these people, or they think the illusion is that they have no choice, they're bound. So that's interesting. Lastly, to say something kind of potentially supernatural that I experienced in a reading for someone else, and this is up to the group and to the viewers to decide, but I used the devil card from the Mother Peace Tarot for a client, and she was asking about a romantic relationship, and the meaning in Mother Peace has more to do, it's generally a more positive deck than Rider-Waite. It's more, I say it's positive, but it comes from a feminine point of view and more people of color. So it's not the devil is fear. It's just it's a little softer in a sense. You'd have to work with the deck to know what I mean. But in the middle of the reading, so she's asking about someone she had recently gone on a date with the night before. There's a payoff, I promise, just wait for it. And I wasn't as familiar with this deck. So I ended up having to look it up, because like, what could this possibly mean? And I said, oh, one of the meanings is, you look up close, there's a clock there, is perfect timing. And in the middle of the reading, this individual who she went on the first date with it was literally, I think the day before, actually messaged her. So anyway, I'll leave that up to you guys to decide, but we both got chills. It was just one of those moments in a reading where you're like, I think something's going on here in the universe. So thank you, Nick.
Okay.
All right.
All right, Nick, I'm going to give you back the cards here.
Okay, great. So there are a few things I just want to comment on that Nancy, I believe you brought this up. You used the term
Okay. Wait, hold on just a second. Jordan, can I wait until after this or?
Certainly.
All right, go ahead, Nick.
So Nancy, I think you used the word illuminating,
Mm-hmm.
and I really, really enjoy that for two reasons. One, because I've had a conversation a couple of different times with some of my teachers at the colleges that I go to here, and I was saying I think in the end we should really actually be thankful for the fact that Trump was in office for 4 years,
Mm-hmm.
because whatever delusion we might have had for being extremely progressive as a collective, this let us know exactly where we stand, and we've got a lot of work to do.
Yep.
And I think it's really interesting that you use the term illumination, because that to me implies shedding light or casting light or anything like that. And that's the meaning of the word Lucifer, the light bearer. Okay, so I just thought that was
Brilliant.
interesting and wanted to make a comment on that.
Cool.
But so just a few keywords that I have written here: carnality, enslavement, egotism, inflated sense of self-importance, and subversion. And so where to begin here? I have several points that I want to make, and I will just try to save some of them to get into, because some are pretty rich and require some group conversation. But as Skip pointed out, the people have chains on them, but the chains are really loose. They could escape at any point that they like, but they are willfully enslaved to this thing. And the interesting thing to me about this is that in the Rider-Waite deck, the card on the left, you can see in the hand, as I've mentioned previously, there is the symbol for Saturn in the hand, and there's also the symbol for Mercury on the navel in the Bota deck on the right. Both of the planetary symbols are there. And it's odd, because I've wondered for a long time why that's there. I've got my own reasons for my own beliefs for its inclusion in the card. But one thing that I've come to realize recently, or just recently learned about, is that in olden times, in Rome, when Saturnalia, obviously Saturn is a big part in that word, was celebrated, all things were subverted, and everything was turned upside down, more or less. And slaves, which slavery was common in that time and in that place, slaves then ruled their masters. People were promiscuity was encouraged, marital obligations were broken, pretty much everything was flipped upside down. And here we see a very similar thing, in the sense that these people seem to be encouraging in a way that people indulge in carnality and promiscuity and maybe even bestiality. I mean, considering that they have hooves for feet. So it's said in an old astrology book called the Picatrix that that Saturn ruled over slaves, and slaves were thought to be in the dominion of Saturn. And I just thought it was really interesting that Saturnalia was also a celebration where all of those things, all of those traditions and roles were completely reversed. And I think that the Mercury symbol is really interesting too, because it actually makes me think of, I think what I have written right here is the reductive lens of science, the over-intellectualization of matters, the hyper-rationalization of the world, resulting in a random, nihilistic, nothing but atoms smashing against one another at the quantum level. And Saturn has to do with in this card, and generally speaking, with inhibition, fear, restriction, law, time, all of these things that, you know, we assume that are just inexorable laws of the world that we live in, like the laws of time. But if you really look into time, you know, Albert Einstein says the illusion of time, or time, is nothing but a persistently stubborn illusion. So,
Yeah.
you know, we see these things as laws that keep us locked into our roles and our place in the world, and not able to pass the minutes in an hour, and experiencing the passage of time is going by extremely slowly. And you know, feeling really trapped inside of those. But what if really all of that is kind of just an illusion?
Right.
So those are the points I'd like to make for now. I have several other things that I want to get to, but I will just turn it over and we can keep going forward.
There's a comment from Sora Tamori on YouTube, which is, I could see the Saturn Mercury symbolism as a restriction or limitation on logic, reason, thought, communication, travel, and physical matter itself. And I've certainly experienced that in every way in the last 4 years.
Yeah, it's really truly very, very deep and very complicated. Not what I'm saying, but the inclusion of these two symbols. I mean, we could spiral off into an hour-long conversation if you ask me about this, because I think that this actually directly relates to Jung's answer to Job and the points that he makes in that book, and what the Gnostics believe about Saturn, and what Plato has to say about the demiurge and all of this different stuff. So maybe we can touch on that as we go forward. But, you know, this is a card that's really, really requires a lot of unpacking.
I would like to jump in.
Please.
So I'm thinking out loud here. I have sort of been a little in and out with my focus, taking notes and everything while everyone was talking. So I think I caught most of what everyone was saying, but maybe you guys can help fill me in. So Saturn, I get this feel that when I hear about Saturn, you know, when I've heard about it mentioned in these classes and these groups, it's different than just my only orientation to Saturn and understanding any deeper meaning before I encountered this class and like my limited exposure to astrology. But the play Titus Andronicus by Shakespeare, which is just the best play, you guys should see it.
Yeah, well, Shakespeare plays are heavily hermetic.
Oh, okay, cool. There's another entry for me because anyway, Titus Andronicus, I recommend watching the movie by Julie Taymor. It features Anthony Hopkins and it really is superb. You don't even have to like Shakespeare to appreciate this movie. And I've never appreciated a movie that was so violent before. It's weird. It's a really beautiful story. Anywho, what does this have to do with Saturn? Because there's a character named Saturninus and his personality, it seems almost to be the opposite of what I hear being described. Maybe not the polar opposite, but he's immature and he's almost like a Trump-like character actually, but he's what his biggest thing is, he's impulsive in an immature way. But I think of Saturn as being more stable than that. And
yeah,
so
I mean, Saturn certainly has everything. Probably the best way to put it is you can think of Saturn as being a very intense ruling father, or a father figure. You can even maybe think of things like patriarchy and stuff like that. But it's weird, you know, like all these things, it has two different poles. So on the one hand, it might be really restrictive and forcing you into understanding the rules of any kind of discipline or anything like that, or the laws of nature, the laws of space and time and stuff like that. But also, if you understand those things and you move in accordance with them, it's not so restrictive on you. So
Yeah.
there's a double interpretation to it for sure. And then, you know, it's a lot of people talk about in popular astrology the idea of the Saturn return as being like either a momentous time in your life or being a horrible time in your life. And I think it really has a lot to do with how much you have matured. You know, if you're a child at 29 and that starts to happen for you, then it's going to kind of drag you down and throw you back on yourself. But, you know, if you are actually maturing at a reasonable rate, then, you know, it might come around.
I just made a mental connection. If may I respond?
Yeah.
I made
Let's give Rhea a chance.
Yeah.
Okay.
Since she raised her hand.
Sure.
But you'll have to unmute, Rhea.
Sorry. I like to try to keep things a little simple because my brain is so complicated. But I feel like I like to think of Saturn, which is, I'm sorry to say, my ruling planet, as a container. And, you know, water is flowing, water is flowing, water is flowing. I want a drink. I need a container. It doesn't matter if it's my hands or if it's a cup somewhere, but that aspect of Saturn, that aspect of limitation is, I think, it's a very good thing to think about when we're thinking about this card.
Yeah, completely. And, you know, in that way, you limit all of water into one container.
Right. And there's been an interesting exchange here on the YouTube channel between someone who styles himself as Death and someone who styles himself as Life Hope.
Welcome, Death.
Yeah, and
we'll incorporate you into the group.
Right. And so Life Hope had provided a link to some issues that are coming up with Pfizer and the vaccines. And obviously, there are some issues. There are issues around the vaccines which do suggest the devil, to the extent that some of our politicians seem to think that they can kill off certain members of certain races and thereby reduce their electoral clout. And that's certainly a devilish idea. And Death pointed out reasonably, I think, although he's been put in a timeout by Miles, but that I had hidden Life Hope's link, and my reason for doing that is not that the vaccine issue isn't relevant at all, but it's not about what we're trying to do here on this program, these programs. And so Death said that I had cut off discussion, which is a kind of devilish kind of thing to do, a kind of a closing the door kind of thing to do, and he's right. It's
a very Saturn kind of thing to do.
It's a limiting kind of thing, and the point is that we're trying to create a body of work that is related to the tarot, and so I'm giving due acknowledgement to these comments, but I will ask our YouTube followers to try to stay on the topic of the tarot rather than get into politics. Jordan, you wanted to say something?
Yeah, and you kind of went full circle. Rhea brought up that she equated to the lovers. It's important to me to note that lovers are the second half of a birth card pair. The devil, the lovers. They are one of the birth card pairs. 6 is lovers, 1 + 5, 15, devil equals 6. So what you get there is that then what came full circle is then Rhea brought up the container or the vessel. So the lovers pours the life into that Saturnian vessel. And that's one of the tools of that personality birth card pair. between the devil and the lovers that are inherently linked in the tarot. So I really appreciate that people have gone around and brought in the lovers a lot here, and there is an official designation of the tarot lovers birth card pair.
A connection that I made while you guys were speaking is that, and for anyone new to the channel watching on YouTube, we've talked a lot of, as our groups become more mixed in gender, we've talked a lot about this. We talk about masculine and feminine energies and opposites, integrating opposites. And the connection I made about Saturn in response to Nick's comment is that the ring around Saturn appears solid to us. And yet when you approach closely, it turns out that it's actually, I don't study space, it's essentially rocks. I'm sure other people know the actual term, but meteorite, it's
little rocks orbiting Saturn.
Yeah,
right. Yeah, and they don't need the scare quotes. They are that. You're right.
Rocks. Okay, so instead of being, I was just saying that to leave room for a more scientific name if there was one, but they're it's not solid. It's just, it has the appearance of being solid. So that concept of structure, but flexibility is there. And anyway, my brain just made that mental connection. It felt important to say it out loud.
Okay, we have a couple of other comments from the YouTube chat channel. Modern Myth says, Saturn also represents reaping or harvest time, hence the symbol of a sickle. It reminds me of the story of Cain and Abel. Okay, well, I'm not familiar enough with the story of Cain and Abel to opine on that, but do you want to say something, Samantha, about that?
I'm not sure of the sickle that's being referred to, but I know that, gosh, I wonder, maybe that person can clarify in the comments. I just know that it was the first.
They're just talking about how in traditional imagery of Saturn, he's always pictured as holding a sickle or a scythe.
And the astrology glyph for Saturn is an abstracted scythe.
So I think instead of my going off on the Cain and Abel story, which I'd love to talk about, but I'm curious as to the commenters, if they're able to be specific. I'm just not sure of the Cain and Abel connection, but I'm curious.
Okay, yeah, I don't know. So also then Nick Chan, our friend in Singapore. So we have followers in Singapore this evening. Nick says, Saturn is often astrologically seen to be something like a hard taskmaster, i.e. time for hard work and rules and paying dues, etc. Saturn is also sometimes Kabbalistically seen as a governor as a kind of enforcer-ish. And
yeah, well said.
Well, and the devil represents, the sensing field in Jungian psychology, and it represents the coins in the tarot. So in other words, it's about physical manifestation, and the devil is about the things in this physical world that we have. And so, okay, go ahead, Jordan.
And right to piggyback right on that, that brings up the symbol of Mercury on the navel, because that's where the life was communicated into us. So our lifeblood came into us from our mother through the navel. And so that's another piece on that. These are worldly matters. These are intensities within us with the devil. And then that Saturn, Venus, lovers connection is within both. So you get the Saturn and Venus up front, whereas the devil, Pan, is more truly Saturnian, but not a Hierophant. So it's a different kind of taskmaster, for example, and it's more of a worldly wisdom than it is an experiential wisdom, than it is, say, an intellectual one.
Well, it plays very well to what you're saying, but the lovers is Gemini, which is ruled by Mercury. So they both have that Mercury thing going on, but it's a noble versus ignoble expression of Mercury in the two cards.
I have another thought, which is that might feel like it's out of left field, but the concept of humor.
Oh yes,
Also-
mirth.
Oh, I didn't think about so many connections being made. It's like, but in my mind, but oh, okay. So I'm reminded of, like, there's different tones of what the devil can take, right? There's the devil like with the disgusting face, you know, chopping people up or doing some like Nazism devil, right? And then there's the devil that's like a Halloween costume for a little kid with the horns, and it's cute. And in some cultures, there's no like evil per se, but it's more of like a trickster type of thing. And I think that to me speaks to my unconscious is coming to the surface when I think about how humor has gotten a lot of us through, and I know has gotten myself through in my own way, the Trump presidency, and how it can be so disarming. And it's even been shown, there's a book called Freakonomics, where the person uses an example of, he talks about how economics can help us understand the world. And there was a Klan group, you know, the Ku Klux Klan, around the time, I forget which year it was, but in this one city that was annoying the people who lived there, not just Black people, but it was like everyone wanted them to leave, you know. And what they actually ended up doing is, on one of their radio shows, they would incorporate they would incorporate making fun of, just in the background of the story, of these people. And that over time, like some studies showed, I would recommend reading the book because I'm paraphrasing, but some studies showed that within some several years, the group disappeared entirely from the town. And it wasn't by, you know, using weapons or anything like that. It was actually using humor. So I think that's
Yeah.
another important way to incorporate the shadow and not give it so much power. Now, that being said, I still, you know, believe in voting and like peaceful protest and going to jail for what you believe in and all that. But
Yeah, but that's the alchemy of comedy.
yeah.
Yeah, well, comedy always points at our shadow, doesn't it?
And tells the truth.
And tells the truth about our shadow.
And often in surprising ways, which is a devilish concept, because most humor comes from a lightning strike of a connection you didn't expect. So in a sense, it's not so much minor hysteria, but you do get a little wild instead of bewildered. And that's comedy. And I mean,
Yeah, you get giddy. I've heard on a scientific level that laughter can mean you actually understand.
mhm.
It's like
Right.
your physiological reaction. Yeah, that's happening now. Yeah.
You see me laughing.
Yeah,
Yeah, right.
Skip's always laughing. He knows everything all the time.
Right. Okay. So Sora Tamari says, I always see the devil more as the all God Pan, much more closely than any Christian interpretation. I don't even see it as evil, although it can be. I never find pure evil from just this card. True evil is always shown to me by a combination of cards, which leads me to believe pure evil is not the energy of the card. Again, it is closer to the energy of Pan.
And I had brought that up earlier. It's
Right.
not Satan. It is Pan, the goat god. If you look at the legs, even on the Rider-Waite-Smith, you get ram or goat legs. So the satyr, Satyr, which is also very Saturnian, just even in a phonetic spelling kind of way.
Okay, I'd like to now ground this conversation a little bit by showing you what Stephen Heller said in his book, and then we'll go to some more risque images.
After we finish with this, there are a few
Yeah.
other things that I want to say just before we completely move away from these two cards.
Okay, go ahead.
Well, do you want to read the Stephen Heller stuff first, or you just want me to go ahead now?
We'll go ahead with your point.
Okay. So it might be kind of kind of sweeping. So if it goes too far, you guys just let me know. But I think if I can see it through to the end, it will be relevant. So the Hebrew letter that's associated with this card is oyin, and it means I. And as I've said in previous conversations, the I cannot see itself. You know, you can think of it as the I, literally the I, or also the I, like the I am, or like the ego capacity that we all share. And I think it's really interesting also in, I know in the Red Book, there are certain images of eyes in kind of a similar, in a similar role. Also in the Lord of the Rings, there's the eye of Sauron, I think is how you say the guy's name, but he's like the force for evil in the movie, and atop his tower there's the eye that, you know, looks out across the land, and wherever they are with the ring, he can just go straight to where they are and see them. But, you know, obviously he can't look back on himself. The eye can't see itself. So the thing that I was picking up on is that in the in Jung's answer to Job, he's essentially breaking apart the book of Job and how God's relationship to Job and his subsequent torture of Job is rather questionable. And at some point or another, this isn't an exact quote, but he said essentially that this is a being that is totally lacking in any kind of self-reflection and just acts without regard for the people in which he's acting upon, or how his actions make those people see him. So I think that this is extremely interesting because the in that book, essentially what Jung is saying is that, I mean, he alludes to this several times, but I don't think he just lays his cards on the table in the sense that he's saying, I'm interpreting this text as a Gnostic would. But what he's saying is essentially that the God of the Old Testament, Yahweh, or what the Gnostics called Yaldabaoth, is also something called the demiurge. And it is a lesser God that's fallen down out of what the Gnostics call the pleroma, was given birth to by Sophia, and then cast aside. And from that, he created the material world. And he's also seen as being Saturn, or the last archon, the last planetary ruler that set all of the other planets in motion, in which we have our orbit. So he's kind of like the father of our little orbit of planets. And he is pretty wicked, as there are several stories from the Old Testament which are an attestation to. But the other thing that to bring this all in, what I'm attempting to say is that I think in Jung's answer to Job, what he's saying is essentially this is the equivalent of the ego of a modern person who doesn't really believe that that believes it's superior to all other forces within its own sovereignty. So that's why I say that I can't see itself. You know, tons of people, you know, think, you know, my ego is really the master in my house, but they don't actually realize that the ego is the inferior part of a larger hierarchy within each person. And because of that, they come across as extremely, extremely egotistical. And to just go with that, I have a few different quotes here. So Isaiah 45:5 says, I am the Lord, and there is no other. There is no God but me. Which is just really interesting from a Gnostic perspective, because it's like this God in the Old Testament is trying again and again by shows of might to convince these people that he is the only God. There is no God other than him, and they have to constantly sacrifice to him and propitiate him through these horrible means. And then in Deuteronomy 32:39, it says, see now that I am he. There is no God beside me. I bring death and I give life. I wound and I heal. There is no one who can deliver you from my hand. Which is just pretty peculiar of a God who's supposed to be about love and light. And I think this is where the Gnostic interpretation sheds a particularly illuminating light on the stories in the Old Testament, particularly the book of Job and stuff like that, because Jung also later goes on to talk about how Job from the beginning says, I know my vindicator lives, essentially saying that he knows that there's something beyond this thing that's torturing him. He knows that truth and light and goodness, or whatever you want to call it, is out there. And
Well, or in there.
Or in there, yeah. And he also says he makes reference to the Kabbalistic tree of life, and he says Job has the experience of seeing the back of Yahweh. Now, what would that mean? That would have to mean that Yahweh was not the true God, and that he was beyond that, looking back at this lesser God that thinks he is the only God.
Ooh, I want to talk.
Much like the ego would within the own person.
That's if I may.
Please.
Okay,
Yeah.
cool. So wow. So I'm reading tarot as a way of life, a Jungian approach to tarot while I'm taking this course. And I want to read something. It's a short paragraph that has to do with numerology and the number 1. And then I want to talk about God. Okay, cool. So it says, it makes the point first that 2 times 2 is equal to 2 plus 2, but and that applies to other numbers, right? But for a number like 1 multiplied by itself always remains 1. Does that imply that 1 is always utterly itself? That 1 is divine perfection, which remains itself during division by itself and multiplication by itself? But when it reflects itself by addition of itself, the other, the 2, comes into being. Thus, the one that is all does not see itself, is not conscious of itself. Only by mirroring in the other, the 2, and the experience of duality, keep in mind the tree of knowledge of good and evil, that's duality right there, can the one become conscious of itself. But this mirroring evokes confrontations and tensions as in every process of true awareness. Symbolically, therefore, the one is a state of unity and wholeness, yet it is in fact unaware of itself. Therefore, there is an enormous potential within it that keeps striving for realization. And then later in the paragraph, it says, it is here that power lies, but you must grasp it. Now, the reason I brought that up is because of what you were saying, Nick, about, okay, God is saying there's no other God but me, right? But it's also, the question is, I forget the way you said it, but that there's such a thing as a demiurge, a demigod. There's a lesser God. So if there's a higher God and a lower God, then that would imply there is more than one God, which seems.
Well, I mean, yeah, that's alluded to all throughout the Bible, where they use male and female.
There's a way I wanted to come up with a resolution, though. This is why I brought it up, because and then there's also, thou shalt have no other gods before me. I am a jealous God. Jealous of what? So there's other gods, right? So what I'm saying is,
that's exactly how Yaldabaoth is described too.
So for me, what this ties in with is a question I asked in my Catholic all-girls school that annoyed the nun, and she didn't have an answer for it, but I just came up with it. It's that, okay. So again, referring to Science of Mind, says that everything is God, that God created us out of itself. That's how Trump can be good somehow. It's all for the evolution of our species, and we are part of God. So given that, it's plausible that God can actually change or improve or just change. And if you look at, and I'm not, when I refer to the Old Testament and the New Testament, I want to be clear to everyone and respect everyone's beliefs. I'm not placing a hierarchy. I'm just speaking of like sacred texts that I'm familiar with, right? Is that you had a God who was more wrathful, as a character in a novel. It was more that patriarch, right? And then as it moves on, at least in the figure of Jesus in the Judeo-Christian tradition, it was more the feminine was coming in, the saving, the gentleness. So
well, I mean, the Gnostics talk about Christ as well too. So I mean, that would be something to look into.
Let's get back onto the issue of the tarot if you don't
Okay.
Well,
mind.
that's why we
Let me-
have the
Because-
devil. That's all I was
because-
trying to say.
Because there
It
are
serves a
probably
function.
100 videos on this YouTube channel about Answer to Job. Okay.
Let me just say one more thing before we move on. It's won't take long at all, but I mean I think that it's
Go ahead.
relevant to this card certainly, and you said it. You know, if the one even engages in a process of thinking of itself, then it's already two. The one, it can't think of itself.
Okay, that's a good
And-
point.
God needs us to evolve was the point I was
Right,
trying to make.
but the issue that you're raising here is whether God is a being, okay, and the idea that we will anthropomorphize God Almighty is a stretch. Okay, I know that's what has happened in the Christian church over the last thousands of years, but you know, one of the main points that Jung makes is that that's not the case. I mean, there's not a God up there. Okay, the gods are here, and so yeah. But we don't have to argue this point any further. Let's go back to the devil card, if you don't mind.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for allowing me to say that. And I really, I say that all because I know it seems like a stretch, but I hope that people are able to understand the analogy between what I just said and how the ego operates, because I think there is a parallel between the two.
Self-awareness.
Yeah, thank you.
Well, and surely, surely there's a lot of the devil card in ego. Okay.
That's exactly what I'm saying. And I think
Right.
that, you know, the way that the wrathfulness of Yahweh and Yaldabaoth parallels the ego when it's not tethered to anything else larger than itself.
Right.
Well, it's the seeming contradiction. To me, this answers some questions about, and I'm bringing it back to the devil card, but you know, why bad things happen to good people? How can you sin and still be worthy of salvation? Like those are questions I've had and a lot of people have had. What I'm saying is that the devil is some type of necessary element in the universe, as well as the ego. We require an ego to get around in this world, just like we require our body to house our souls to get around in this world. So it feeds into some type of lesson. I think God needed to create something other than God's self in order to expand. So therefore the devil would somehow still be a part of God. And now I'm coming to land back to the devil card. So
Okay, so Samantha, you have one question from the YouTube channel, which was, would you repeat the name of the book you're reading?
Yes, and I can even type it in the YouTube chat.
That would be great.
I'm doing both. It's called Tarot as a Way of Life, a Jungian Approach to the Tarot, and it is by Karen Hammaker Zondag, hyphenated last name. And I'll also put that in the YouTube chat.
Okay, terrific. All right, thank you. Okay, so we're going to go to Stefan Heller, which is a simpler way of looking back at the devil card again. And so, Nick, would you comment on this path that we're referring to here? What are these two Sephiroth here?
6 is Tiferet and 8 is Hod.
Okay, and what do they mean? What's the significance of this path?
Well, it's hard to say because it kind of depends on the level at which you're talking about it, but a simple answer would be that it connects the sphere of the sun, of the self, to that of the intellect. And those are the two spheres that it connects. And the pathway in between it, well, pretty much everything that I've just said previously.
Okay, so all these things can come up. All right. So the only reason I point this out for any new listeners we have is that the Kabbalah is a part of this discussion of the Tarot over this year, and we haven't really gotten into it except one specific lecture when Nick led us in a discussion of the Tarot or of the Kabbalah, and we will come back to it. And so at this point, I just want to point out this pathway and where it is on the Kabbalah. And if you want to jump the note, then your numbers, you can go to the Kabbalistic Tarot by Robert Wang. He talks about it in great detail. Okay, so Stephen Heller, the 15th Arcanum, a gigantic devil figure with a goat's head, bat wings, human torso, shaggy legs, and bird feet, sits on a half cube. His right hand is raised in a gesture of saturnine rejection against the heavens, while his left hand holds the inverted torch of destruction. Two human figures, one male, the other female, possessing horns and tails, are chained to the seat of the devil, their chains being loose so as to allow for their escape. The lower mind, which, like the mountain goat, scales the pinnacles of the material world, holds the soul in bondage until, with determination, we slip out of its shackles. Although outwardly formidable, the goat of the world has no real power to keep man from his heavenly destiny. By ceasing to yield to demonic illusion, we begin to see worldly attachments and cares as ridiculous, and we laugh the laughter of the gods. Now, the 26th path from Had to Tifereth, keynote, from consciousness of the world, we move to the wisdom of God, beauty and splendor of divine illumination, beckon to us from the summit of equipoise, and we free ourselves from delusion in order to reach it. Motto, canst thou, poor devil, give me whatsoever? When was a human soul in its supreme endeavor e'er understood by such as thou? That's from Goethe, Faust, Part 1.
The interesting thing too about that is Faust is essentially like the Book of Job in the sense that there's the God and the devil make a bet against one of their just most upright servants and try to tempt him into their ways.
I imagine Goethe noticed that when he was writing his book.
Most certainly.
Yeah. So meditation. From the depths of limitation, I call to thee, O beauty ineffable. Shine upon my path, thou midnight sun of beauty and love. I shall endure the darkness, and I shall dwell in the dungeon of outer dark places, if only I know that thy day is approaching. O never-setting sun of my soul, I call upon thy radiant beauty. Turn my ignorance into wisdom and my passions into love for thee. For it is thou whom I have loved throughout the eons, and it is thou whom I seek in every place. Give me lightness of heart so that I may loosen my chains of servitude and fly into thine arms, my hope, my lover and soul liberator.
Okay. Oh, he's talking about exactly what I'm saying in that. I mean, that is like a very poetic way of giving you the whole Gnostic cosmology.
Well, given that he's a bishop of the Gnostic Church, that's quite appropriate. Okay, so are we ready for the she-wolf? Oh my goodness.
Ready.
How did I do that? I seem to have turned
Raquel and I are cheerleaders.
Okay. All right. I have the Starman Tarot card upside down, but I promise that I will turn it over at the appropriate moment. So just consider it a short-term problem. Okay. So here's the devil card. All of us men can relate to this card. It's pretty cool. And
I feel like Barracuda by Heart should be playing in the background.
okay, so I'm reading from Devani Wolf's discussion in the She-Wolf Tarot deck. And we've enjoyed her analyses over the weeks, so that's why I bring her up. The Devil Capricorn, keys, going the distance, uncompromising, risk-taking, joy and pleasure, going our own way. Artwork illumination. The Baphomet is the traditional illustration of the devil, and this takes the imagery in a slightly different direction. Here we have the devil herself and her two winged counterparts, representing the dualistic spectrum of experience. There is so much to be seen, felt, and understood, and the devil is not afraid of taking it all on. Here she is proud, sleek, sensual, and defiant. Her willfulness is what stands out most about her. Light, all the radical thinkers and makers in her story have a little devil in them. There is no evil or negative connotation to this. The devil, in this case, represents someone who strikes off in their own direction, someone who is unafraid of the unknown and willing to overturn all stones and go down dark passages others tremble to even imagine in order to seek knowledge and truth. The only issue tends to be that the further we go, the more misunderstood we are, or we may become those who don't immediately see the benefits of our path. However, if we receive this card, we are being asked to stay the course and not be dissuaded by those who would rather us remain within a comfort zone for their sake. If we have a mission, we must fulfill it no matter what. There is so much joy to be found in the risks we take on this journey. The shadow interpretation, fear and trepidation may be staying our legs. The opinions of others may have gotten the better of us, making us feel like our ideas are too radical, our lifestyle is too loose, our goals are too out there. We can choose to listen to this and remain in the crowd, or we can break free and run. This card is asking us to run. Be willful, be defiant. The shadow indication may also point toward an excess of radicalism at the expense of others. The Wiccan Red Ace states, "An ye harm none, do what ye will. Chase down truth, but do not cause others to suffer." And the mantra, "I serve no master except for myself." Okay, comments?
Yes. So, first of all, it's interesting listening to this and also acknowledging some degree of discomfort within myself as we talk about, oh, the devil's not bad, the devil's not, because even though on an intellectual level, I get that, I do think that a lot of us have been primed to fear this concept. So I wanted to be honest and just notice psychologically what's going on with me, so I can integrate and align. And then there was another thought, one moment that seemed relevant. Oh, yes. It's like how I was thinking, like, what could the purpose of the devil be? Like, so in these cards, we have this idea, and then, but how could it be like this seeming contradiction? Okay, so there's God and the devil. If everything is God, then then the devil would have to be God, but the devil's supposed to be evil and all this. And what I think it has to do with is I think it's the same way that atheism, in my opinion, is like a political art or something. I think of it as performance art that's critiquing religion, but not actual spirituality. because if you believe in the devil, you sort of automatically believe in God, you know, or if you are an atheist, that's a belief in the lack of something.
Yeah, it's always defined by theism.
Yeah. So in the same way, I think perhaps the devil card, and this is how I could read it, the devil card is, it's about finding out for yourself, you know, and not just take, because it can be very oppressive to just blindly follow a religion, you know, say that can tell you homosexuality is wrong. These are my personal beliefs. I oppose the following beliefs. I just want to speak for myself, but like homosexuality is wrong, like abortion is wrong, like, you know, all these things you're going to go to hell for. Well, are they really bad? You know, you have to figure out who you are in this world by tasting the fruit. I guess I'll play Lilith, but not to. But seriously, like, what's the point? What's the point of, like, there's knowledge, but you're not supposed to have knowledge?
Yeah.
Well,
right.
and also this, you make a really good point there, bringing up Lilith, because I wanted to bring up that this card, we're trained, this is the masculine Lilith. This is the other give it a bad name, be ashamed of, feel guilty about, shy away from your intensities card. I mean, in the she-wolf card here, which I find particularly interesting, is that she kept the Baphomet pentacle orientation at the top. And that's a masculine representation, the phallus being pointing down. A feminine, I would have expected her almost rotate it to have the 2 points down, which is the feminine expression of that symbol. So it's interesting. And with this whole deck being so thoughtful, I would rather think that it might be intentional, that there's just that one little nod to the masculine up there, and then it's complete.
Well, it's a woman in her you know, we all have feminine and masculine within us. And I think of, in this case, you know, the phallic nature of it is a symbol of power. It's a symbol of a certain type of power that is going out into the world, making things happen, tasting the fruit for yourself. You know, so I look at that as the integration of, even within myself, like I'm very feminine in many ways, but sometimes I need that get up and go. I lit some cedar incense before because I wanted that get up and go, that yang energy to balance my yin so I could get things done. You know,
And
so
you brought up a great point.
I noticed Raquel had her hand up for a while.
Thank you, Raya. What I want to say about the devil card as an experience, like, I think it's going to, like, have something to do with everything that you guys saying, but as an experience for myself, when I figure out what the devil card meant to me, because I had this really intimate experience with tarot. Like, I used to draw a card every day, and I got the devil for like a couple of years, like every day. And I started like to really think about my life and what that meant for me. And for me, like, I experienced a lot of abusive relationships, you know, and I think, like, thinking about the big picture, about God, about the devil, and about the political problems that we have, is kind of like the projected shadow. Like, it's easier to see the problem in other people instead of seeing it in ourselves. And inside of an abusive relationship, what I had to realize was, how will I be responsible for myself and for what happens to me while I do not fall into the guilt of, or the shame of being that relationship, you know, how to be responsible for myself, in a sense of, when I understood a little bit of the devil card, I realized that I was pursuing relationships that killed myself. You know, I was not only I was having those relationships like kind of out of the blue, I craved them. And when I got I'm living now with my husband. And when we started living together, my husband really like praised every single little thing that I would do inside the house. And I resented him because of that.
Mm.
I got pissed, like, why would you not repress me? Because everybody else did. And I didn't realize that. And that is like the devil card in a sense of experiencing it, like there is something that you are systematically doing to yourself that's kind of like repressing in a bad way, and that energy, you can work with it. It's kind of like this creativity force that you have inside of yourself, and you kind of picking some sort of relationships and experiences that actually demonize that, and that is like I think that is the devil and the God experience of oneself. And that is why the devil, in some sense, is also a part of God, because sometimes you have to go through that type of pain to realize what you're doing to yourself, and not be guilty of it or ashamed of it. It's not about that. It's about how will you strengthen yourself to live better,
Right. Go ahead, Rhea.
Well, in light of what Raquel just said, I'm kind of amused to see that the male in the Rider-Waite card is handing the key to the female. I mean, I love that because it just backs up imagistically what you were saying. There's the key. Go for freedom.
Yeah.
And then I wanted to also quote from the Golden Dawn material.
Sure.
The civilization into which most readers of these pages were born is passing away before our eyes. And then I drop down. We're confident that this era is a prelude to a greater measure of freedom and enlightenment for all mankind. And I like to look at the fire. We haven't really talked about the fire in this card, but there's a material where it's representative of rebellion, revolution, action, take to the streets. And it's lighting up the tail of the masculine, and there's the loose chains on the neck. I mean, it's a very positive card.
Right.
In my view.
Yeah. Amelia commented, Raquel, thank you so much for sharing. That resonates with me so much. And just so you know that you're not the only one to get the devil card in a reading. Melissa Townsend did a very expensive reading for me in the summer. And this is the reading I got. Oh, wait a minute. I pushed the wrong button. Share. Okay, there it is. There's my reading. So in the center is the Hanged Man. And of course, that relates to me very strongly.
Can you enlarge it? Is it possible? Is it possible?
Yeah, I may be able to. Let's see how I would do that.
I think you can press. Oh, on the upper left, you see how there's a minus and a plus? I think you need to bring it to the plus. Yeah, keep going left. It's gray. It's subtle. Keep going left. See it up there? Right there?
Yeah. There.
See that? I
That's
hope
very,
that's it. Ah,
yep, it is that, but
maybe not.
Doesn't seem to want to operate. I don't know why.
You can probably hit Control plus or Command plus on your keyboard. It should just pop up.
Right, let's try that. Nope, nothing happening.
Okay.
You can press Shift Command 3, if, at least on Macs, to take a picture of it if anyone, if Skip doesn't mind. If anyone
Shift Command 3. What does that do?
On a Mac, you can, yeah.
Well, I'm on a Mac.
Meanwhile, we can see it quite well.
Okay, so
yeah.
So Melissa uses her own deck, and I don't really see an option to increase the reading, but I'll just tell you what it is. It's obviously the Celtic cross, and here is the Hanged Man, and I'll just leave a few of these things out, but the outcome card is the Devil. That's what that is, and she correctly has my hopes and fears as the Five of Pentacles. It's both. So that's exactly right. And a few other things. I can't even tell what this card is. Maybe that's the Moon. And the Princess of Swords reversed is what I got as where I'm at, and where the world is the Wheel of Fortune. But anyway, Raquel, this is for you. The Devil was my outcome card. So.
I was thinking, Skip, thank you for sharing that. I'd be curious to know also about what your question was, how you integrated it into your life, and maybe that's not for YouTube at this time. But
well, I didn't have a specific question, and I mean, obviously, I think that the central point is about the Hanged Man, which is what I am, and the Devil I think of as kind of the trickster, and I've been a trickster all my life. If I'm not Hermes, I'm definitely a trickster. And,
there's one thing I want to say about the trickster thing, is that I think that we need to contrast the idea of the trickster as it's imaged by the devil in opposition to the magician, because the way that I interpret both of those cards is that a trickster, in the true sense of the word, is somebody that does not point beyond anything other than himself. He only seeks to dissolve everything down and not really restructure anything. But I think about fundamentally magicians like to mess with the way that you see reality or the way that you perceive reality, but also to say maybe things aren't as you see them, but they also kind of fundamentally point the way towards a better understanding of the world. So it's trickster in that it's subversive versus actually adding something to your view of the world.
I want to say something about what Nick just said, and also about fire. One of the things is like tricksters. When I think of a trickster, I think of more like the court jester who gets away with saying things that are true without getting about the king, about politics, about how the court is going, without getting his head cut off, because he says it in such an entertaining way. That's a kind of clownish trickster that even he could laugh at himself, right? So but also I think of it as like, in terms of the serpent in the garden, they use a part of truth. The best lies have a part of truth, so you start to believe it. So in the garden, the serpent said something about, well, God doesn't want you to have his power. If you eat this fruit, you'll know the difference between good and evil. God doesn't want you to know that, but if you eat it, you'll become powerful. So they did know the difference between good and evil after that, but God's reasons weren't bad. So that's an example of a lie. The other thing I wanted to say about fire, because R mentioned fire, is that fire is associated with the suit of wands, which means action. So the way that my personal experience relates to those themes is that I have had times in my life where I've been so afraid, I've been paralyzed with indecision, and it's been difficult to take action. And I think for me, and I'm still going through this, the process of individuating and growing into an adult is accepting that no matter what I do, I will fail. I will make mistakes, because that's part of taking action. But that's the collateral damage involved in trying something and following a passion. And, otherwise you're totally paralyzed. So
when I think of the most fundamental advice I would give to any of my grandchildren, it is you have to make mistakes, so make them as fast as you can. And when I had a big office where I was doing a lot of hiring, one of the questions I always asked people was, what is the biggest mistake you ever made? And the reason is because, and of course that's a stump the stars question, because people go, how can I tell my
Working too hard. Everyone
May I say something?
Yeah,
Sorry.
Go ahead.
Well, in reference what Nick said about, well, he mentioned the magician. The thing is that for me, the devil is a force that is part of our reality, and it's also a part of each one of us. And it's interesting for me that in this roadmap of the tarot, the previous card in the fifth tarot, it's the alchemy. And when alchemy means that you have to mix elements, right?
Yes.
So and I was reading yesterday, I was reading Leonardo Boff. He wrote a book about San Francis de Assisi. And San Francis de Assisi is one example that we can take of somebody that was able to put together his shadow and his light, and made that alchemy, and he became like a magician, right? He became like an image of God, you would say, more or less. And that's the thing, I think, that we have to pay attention in this tarot as a roadmap that is telling us. It is telling us the tools that we have at hand to work on those forces. Like, because I mean, for me, really, the devil is a force that expresses in the collective unconscious and in our own lives, right? So, well, that's an idea that I had and I wanted to share with you.
Yeah, thank you, Patricia. And I'm sorry I didn't get to you before you had to jump in. I apologize for that.
Never mind.
I was working on it, but I didn't quite get there. Okay, Jordan.
Patricia, thank you for bringing that up. And then that links right to what Raquel said. And then also Rhea with the fire, because the first trickster would be the magician Loki. This trickster is not personified. This trickster is a force, but it's that blind spot of expectation. Say Raquel's she got resentful for nice things, because it's basically the mentor-tormentor of the abuse. And what happens is then you can't see nice things. They're alien to you, so they actually are traumatic. They disturb you because they're outside your sphere of influence, until you obviously made a connection and you turned, because you basically lifted your own veil or got around and inspected your expectations.
Okay, I want to check one thing. Nancy, did you say that you had cards you wanted to share with us today?
No, that wasn't me.
That wasn't you.
Not
okay.
me.
Okay, someone did say that to me. Okay, there's a couple of more interesting points here.
Raquel had raised her hand too after you go through.
Okay, JVH says the devil spelled backwards is lived. And that's an interesting point. And then Tammy Hanley says, in literal translation, I believe Job refers to the devil as the accuser. Is the devil in ourselves that which makes us question ourselves and doubt ourselves so critically? And, probably that is a reference to those chains that are loosely tied.
Mr. Skip, there's also one more thing that I would like to say.
Sure.
In this book that I'm reading, the author is talking about the ways that you can work with your shadow. one is by denying it, and I was just thinking about the Opus Dei and those rules they had to use like a whipped on themselves, which is
Uh-huh.
horrible.
Yeah, we were
That's a
just
no-no
watching
way.
the Da Vinci Code last night.
But that's a way that that you can work on your shadow. And the other one is just recognizing it and controlling it in a way, not hitting yourself, right? But controlling it in a way that it doesn't harm anybody, because forces out of control harm others and
Yeah,
yourself,
surely.
right?
Well,
Surely.
That's all. Thank you.
It's like how sports, for instance, I mean, have replaced intertribal warfare is a theory I've heard.
Hey,
You know?
leave sports out of this, okay?
Hey, I like sports.
I'm just kidding.
Yeah, no,
totally
I know. No, but I mean, what a healthier way, instead of, someone from Oakland plays to prove their strength over someone from San Francisco instead of killing each other. Now, the war still goes on, so that's problematic, but that's just an example of sublimating the instinct to display your dominance over another human being. And art is also a way of doing that. So instead of seeking revenge, you can write a revenge fantasy. That's what Django's about. But
yeah, you can certainly do that.
I think Nick wants sports says the world card. So really higher octave.
Yeah, okay.
Raquel, did you have something you wanted to say?
Yeah, really quickly. I just wanted to point out that Saturn in this card is about structure, but every now and then the structure has to fall, it has to change it all. So I think that is what it means, the Saturn in this card.
Yeah, I think I think it's that, and it's also being locked in those patterns of behavior and thinking there is no way out. There's something I'd like to bring up, just picking up on one of these comments here from Tammy Henley in the YouTube chat. She says, in literal translation, I believe Job refers to the devil as the accuser, is the devil in ourselves, that which makes us question ourselves and doubt ourselves so critically. And I think that this will be ground for a good discussion. So we've alluded to this at several points, but I would just start by saying I think that we have to be able to posit the existence of some kind of evil, but we don't necessarily have to be able to posit the existence of evil outside of ourselves. We have to be able to recognize it within ourselves. And it makes me think of the quote of perennial wisdom. I don't even know to who it belongs, but it's that the greatest trick the devil ever played was convincing everybody that he doesn't exist. And I think if we constantly look outside of ourselves and say, this person's evil, Trump's evil, this country's evil, this and that, then we're always convincing ourselves that the devil doesn't exist.
I would like to
and I also think that it's absolutely critical for the idea of free will, or for us to have any choice in any kind of matter. If everything is good, and if we only posit the existence of divinity, of God as good, and don't ascribe an evil component to God, or a separate component that is under God, that is evil, that is separate from God, there are no two poles for us to operate within, and free choice is not even a choice. We're polarized in the good, or this eternal blissful Garden of Eden. We haven't fallen into the realm of choice and duality.
Who hasn't?
I mean, the general we or you, I mean, people.
Innocent people, naive people.
We haven't fallen into duality.
No, okay. What I'm saying is that if we don't actually give the devil its due, then we're polarizing on one side, and that to me equates to the same situation as being in this Garden of Eden, thinking that everything is good, and we as a people, or you or I whatever hasn't fallen into the realm of having to make a choice between good and evil.
Right, right. Colleen, you wanted to say
Colleen,
something?
Yeah, Colleen.
Well, I'm looking at this from the point of view of Jung and the alchemical phenomena that's going to happen if you release the feminine and the masculine that are in this card. So I see the animus and the anima are on the masculine and the feminine. And when that's released, for a woman, when the animus is released or the male is released, she goes through an alchemical change, which will appear to be what has gotten into you. The devil has gotten into you, and then I may lose or kill what was going on for me before, and maybe I need to do that. That the devil is going to play a game when the masculine and the feminine are released.
That's a very good point. And also, too, I think that even to extend where Nick said the devil must get his due, I think that's also not taking responsibility. So to me, rather than devil getting his due means I turn inward and face him or face it. And then I'm able to enact with that anima and animus, the female and masculine spirit. That's a very good point.
Yeah.
It's right there in the card.
Yeah, definitely.
I think it's interesting that it's right there in the card and it's not a trickster. It's overt. It's, it's like a billboard,
Yeah, it really is.
Right. Okay, let's see. Moving on here, because we have a few more cards to get through. I just have to figure out where this is.
An interesting quote lead in to that David Bowie, Starman, the Devil card, is a quote from Bowie himself. That's one of my favorites. That he said, "Heaven and religion are for people who are afraid of going to hell. Spirituality is for those of us who's already been there."
Yeah. Okay, I reversed the Starman's card now. This is the Starman Tarot by a David De Angelis. And
now the she-wolf looks like a face with two eyes.
So
yeah.
That's not what I see. But what
it's the Yoniverse.
Click on it certainly is. Click on view options. Everyone who's not Skip, you can click on view options and change the size on your own that way if you're wanting to see it larger.
Okay, and I can do it here. Now I just couldn't do it off my photos. So let me, all right, so here's the Starman Tarot, and you don't have to look at the she-wolf any longer.
I just realized Manuela is in here. Gosh.
She was here.
Oh.
But she disappeared on us.
She's still here.
She is?
I'm kidding. She's being a trickster.
Spirit.
The spirit. Yeah, she's here.
We just can't see her.
For sure.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. So this is the Starman Tarot, which is gradually growing on me. Because I like the formulations in their writing, and the images are compelling. So here's the sidebar. Embrace your inner trickster. Give in to temptations, making choices based on impulse rather than desire. Deceiving yourself, feeling hopeless. Reversed, engaging in manipulative behavior, lashing out at others, sabotaging others' fortune for your own good, for your own gain. And so then in detail what he says, I am the master deceiver, and it is time to break the spell. Set in the alluring psychedelic vision of a post-apocalyptic world, This card pays homage to the spirit of Bowie's Diamond Dogs. The devil is personified in a similar vein in Bowie's punk trickster Halloween Jack, but he is cast as an amoral being of artificial intelligence. You enter this domain at your peril, for he is the bewitching tormentor aided by mechanized demons and bizarre otherworldly guard dogs. He is the possessor of miraculous intelligence, acquiring, implementing, and building knowledge in ways far superior than humanity, and yet without consciousness has no empathy, no sense of right and wrong. The devil, the embodiment of general artificial intelligence, so engineered to amplify human intelligence and become humanity's savior. Mirroring Bowie's savior machine, the man who sold the world, helping to eradicate war, disease, and poverty, has become the double-edged sword. It is the ghost in the machine, the mind-body divide, head without heart, the emerald tablet encoded with an ancient alchemical formula to positively transform and purify the imperfect human condition, is also now the devil's possession. Are we in grave danger? The ancient doctrine of original sin, when Adam and Eve are cast out of the Garden of Eden, having rebelled and eaten the forbidden fruit from the tree of knowledge of good and evil, reflects the mythological impurity and the division of union. The polarities of day and night become metaphors for light and dark, the conscious and the invisible, mysterious and conscious. Traditionally, the devil is concerned as the personification of whatever is labeled in society a threat to continuity and the supposed power of the majority. He is the archetypal rutting scapegoat, the reflection of humanity's striving for goodness gone wrong, the course of a pure spiritual life perverted. The devil is the great tempter, the voice of deception and corruption. For many cultures, sexual pleasure and ecstasy, especially out of wedlock, the legally sanctioned institution of marriage, are deemed sinful. Pleasure itself has been seen as unholy and the work against God, a dishonorable and addictive distraction. In the world of duality, when we create a force for good, we create an equal force for bad. When we consciously deny, pushing away our natural instincts in the pursuit of light, they push back. The devil is the trickster who secretly bewitches us, encouraging us to continue life debilitating behaviors that drain our resources and relationships. This card calls us to examine that which remains hidden in darkness within the realms of personality, that which we have denied or suppressed, believing ourselves to be wrong. Often feeling a sense of helplessness, failure, and loss of control, we are locked out of our own lives. Reversed, engaging in deceitful, hurtful, and manipulative behavior, bringing misery and pain to others, finding satisfaction in people's misfortune, acting out of some spite or resentment, sabotaging the good fortune of others for personal gains and gratification. Okay.
The devil can never take away our free will. And I think that the biggest illusion, that is the illusion. We spoke to that in the devil card about how the chains are loose. They can get out of it. But so I think that's where evil can exist. Or like when people say the devil made me do it, you know, that's not true. The other thing is, yeah, that's why discernment is so important, because again, it's persuasive. It's like how Hitler used fear to get people to gang up on the Jews. You know, it persuades you. The other thing I wanted to say to be more like an oracle card and less like a tarot and modernize it is there was a movie, my first exposure to David Bowie was in the movie Labyrinth, which is so good. I don't know if you guys have seen it or not, but Labyrinth, anyone? Jordan has. It's a movie with Jennifer Connelly, and David Bowie plays a character that is kind of a trickster character. And she goes into this other world, and it doesn't ruin the movie for me to say this, but it is a spoiler alert. At some point, they're dancing, they dance together. He's seductive as well, so that's a part of it. Later, I realized as an adult, oh, it's talking about a sexual awakening as well. It's talking about this adolescent becoming a woman and learning to take care of her little brother. She's kind of a brat in the beginning. She hates her brother. She doesn't want to babysit him, and he's like a toddler. So she goes to rescue him in the labyrinth. And the point at which she wins in the movie, she's dancing with him and under his spell. And dance always means sex in musicals and movies, by the way. It's like a safe way to talk about it. But she's dancing with him, and then in the middle of it, she realizes, and he's showing her different objects to tempt her and get her to stay in the labyrinth. And she just says, "You have no power over me." And everything collapses. And that was the way that she got out of the labyrinth. So I relate that to the devil, to realize, like when people go, oh, we're still talking about Donald Trump, but Trump let Biden have it. He finally conceded. No, he didn't do anything. Biden just won. He just finally got out the way. It's an illusion that he could do that.
Yeah, which he wants to sell because he wants to use his illusions in the future, either for himself or his kids. But I think he's in for a little bit of a comeuppance after July the 20th at noon.
You mean January the 20th?
January 20th.
January 20th.
Oh, God, July.
Yeah, God.
Oh,
July.
God. No.
Yeah, I apologize. January 20th at noon. It's an old Pennsylvania Dutch penalty, right, to shun people. And and I think that
and Amish people do that too. Man.
Amish.
Yeah.
And even the Amish allow their teenagers to go on, is it the Devil's Walk? It has the word devil in it, I believe, where in their teen years, they get to go out into the city.
It's called Rumspringer, I think.
Rumspringer. And I believe they're encouraged to have exposure, and some of them will drink or maybe have sex.
That's like the Amish Saturnalia.
Wow. And if they choose to come back to their village, then it's like, more powerful. They chose this lifestyle. They weren't just born into it. And some people decide to get out. So to me, that's part of the eating the fruit.
That's exactly what I'm saying. The thing that I would like, and maybe we can talk about this, maybe we can't, but I keep going back to it. And it's an idea that I feel like it's probably been the root of tons of philosophical conversations, but it's the idea that if there is free will, and if we don't choose evil and we choose good, does that still mean that we have free will? Because I don't know, I can't get my mind off this idea that I guess it's from the Bible. It's a quote that there is no will other than thy will.
Well, Jung's position was that once you have developed your ego, then you have free will. And so he was always referring back to 1 John 4:1, which says, examine the spirits, whether they be of God or not. And so we have the free will to decide to do things that are not good, but then what are the consequences to ourselves and our progeny if we do those things?
But then I think about the opposite of that, and I mean, I understand what you're saying, but it seems to me like, from a less to not psychologize it, but look at it from a religious point of view, it seems like you step into the way everything is moving as a force for the good rather than as a force for the evil. And that's still, that discernment more seems to me like a process of choice and discrimination between spirits, be they good or evil. But it really seems like even still, it's an illusion that we have free will.
Well,
and at the same time, perhaps we do have free will, but maybe it's more like free choice.
In the Garden of Eden, to me, what it represents on a psychological level, after I started studying Buddhism a bit, is this non-duality, right? The one. God made these things and he saw that it was good. We could talk more about that phrase, saw that it was good, and I'll get to that in a minute. But so there's nothing but goodness, right? And yet, God, what did Nick say that just, and the tree wasn't the knowledge of evil. The tree wasn't even evil. It was the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. So I'm wondering if that speaks to something about the illusion. I would rather say appearance, because in science of mind anyway, things appear to be real. You know, hate appears to be real, sin appears to be real, even disease in our body. We experience it as real with our senses, but their theory is that it's actually the appearance of these things. Even our feelings and thoughts are appearance, and the only truth is God's love and goodness. So given that like paradigm, I think the tree of knowledge of good and evil was some splitting between you. If there's nothing but goodness, is it really good? But that's our original state, is that there was nothing but goodness and oneness. And then suddenly we became aware of this idea that, oh, there isn't just goodness, you know, there's something else. I want to say one other thing, okay, about saw that it was good. Okay, so I used to read that as God made these things. We're personifying God. God made these things and they're good in and of themselves. Like he just accidentally made something good and then he saw it. But I think what it actually means for our purposes is it's about perception. Because God saw, it became good. And in our own psyches, well, if you study science of mind or the law of attraction, that's kind of the idea, that it's our perception that creates our reality. So we can choose to see the good even when evil is offered. It's our seeing that makes it good, not its inherent goodness or badness.
Well, I guess that's part of what Jung was saying through the Red Book, which was that human beings only learn things through blood. Okay. And that there's nothing that is so bad that it doesn't also become good at some point. And so God works in mysterious ways, and one of the mysterious ways he works is he killed 280 million people by violence in the 20th century, and also he's killed 250,000 Americans with COVID right now. But that's how we learn, because we're knuckleheads, basically. I'm not speaking for you, but I'm speaking for myself that, I can be a knucklehead sometimes. And so, we have to have things beaten into us, like this governor of South Dakota who refuses to mandate masks. And as a result, her state is one of the most contaminated even as a country in the whole world. North Dakota and South Dakota. Finally, knucklehead governor of North Dakota buckled and ordered a mask mandate because he was number one in the world, and this governor of South Dakota was number two in the world, but she's about to become number one. And the question is, will she be reelected, I suppose?
I think too, to go back to the trickster and even Samantha, the word appearance, I mean, appearance versus reality is a common theme in literature, not just modern literature. I mean, transcending even irony. And what's interesting here is the trickster of expectation. Right, Raquel indicated she shared her story. She had all those expectations, and those expectations probably carried heavy, heavy truth. I mean, enough to drive her life. And then she saw through the mirage. She saw through the trickster. And in that sense, then good and evil themselves were the tricksters, because she had tricked herself or been tricked or allowed herself to be tricked by her traumas, that somehow because she had them, they're good, except they are hurtful. Well, they're bad. So there comes a tug of war in your brain there that's very devilish. The two cylinders of the man and the woman in the front of the card. So, I mean, I kind of go back further to the figure in the back. That's the one that's being evolved. And the feminine and the masculine in the front are those things that give an enactment to that base ego goat. I mean,
something
I have
can be
go ahead.
good and we could still be afraid of it. And I don't want to comment on Raquel's experience right now, because I feel like that's personal, and I'm sure that, I'll just say this, that I'm sure that she's learned what she needed to learn. So I don't feel the need to contextualize her experience surviving abuse. That being said, I was just thinking as Jordan was speaking about anima and animus, which I just finally learned the meaning of within this class today, that it is I might be reversing it, but the masculine, the feminine that exists naturally within the masculine, and the masculine that exists naturally within the feminine. And I think it's interesting that trans rights, trans and non-binary, and what's the other, there's another term, gender fluid, people that have always existed, by the way, but that there's this more visibility. And I think that the phobia around it, because I've dealt with this, I have a member of my family that's transitioning and seen how it's affected just naturally, and they're very young, but they're expressing as initiating, not identifying with the gender that we assigned them. And so it's made me look at myself and our whole family look at ourselves. And even though I know a lot of trans people, I've dated trans people, it's sort of like it can be scary for people, because when you see someone else going through a transition, not just in the literal gender way, but any type of life transition, it can make you turn toward yourself and question yourself. And I wonder if part of the fear around transgendered people expressing in a gender non-conforming way has to do with our fear of anima and animus, of even, let's say, you can be a woman, a heterosexual woman dating a man, and if he's, even though it can be, and I'm not speaking for you, Raquel, I'm speaking of in my imagination or this theme. So if a man is in touch with his feminine side and can be gentle and has that integrated and isn't just about brute dominion over you, that can be frightening. And I know I've experienced the opposite, where men can be intimidated by my vocalness, my outspokenness, the parts of me that are more masculine. So I think, and then of course, that's a very heteronormative example. So there's all ways that plays out. I was just using man and woman as an example, is it's really just, even when something's good for us, it can be frightening. Like if you think about it, honestly, trans people can be, and I'll end with this, I promise, but trans people, if you really believe in a soul, right? I think it's interesting that some religious people are like, this is the devil and all this. Well, if you believe in a soul, it would make sense that you could be born in a body that doesn't fit your soul. Then in fact, that could even be evidence that there is a soul separate from our body.
If we're going to talk about stuff like this, I would just ask that we have we be open to express ourselves. So when I say this, it may be controversial, it may not, but no, it just comes from a place of intending to be thoughtful. But it kind of seems to me like in certain cases that it might be an externalization of an inner process.
What do you mean?
Surely.
What do you mean?
Like if we all have these potentialities within us, I think it's within the realm of everyone to feel like I have a woman trapped inside of me or something like that. And I think it's just particularly tricky for young people to have the capability to make that transition themselves. Maybe, this is something that it's very difficult to talk about. So this is why I said,
well, I think these
phenomenon.
I think these things are always going on. These things are always going on back and forth in everybody. And it's becoming more prominent because more people are talking about it. But that doesn't mean that it's more evident or that it's bad. It's simply we change. I mean, I look at my 10 grandchildren, and this year they look like my side of the family, and next year they look like their father's side of the family. People change in many, many different ways as they develop through life. And so, I think it's quite normal for kids to, especially, the place that it's often come up throughout my life is tomboys. Okay, young girls under the age of 12 who like playing with the boys, and then puberty comes along, and oh my God, they're angry because they find out what the deal is. And I remember one of my active participants back at the beginning saying that, we were angry when we found out what the deal was, right? And so, Samantha, I think you should just let the process go back and forth, but not commit to any surgery.
Well, it's not my choice. It's not my
child.
choice. Yeah, so it's not my choice. I am not transitioning, and no one is. And I don't want to be in a position. I'll say this much, but I don't feel the need to, beyond what I'm about to say, like I don't want to defend my family or my nephew. I'm simply speaking from my experience of what's going on in my life and how I'm relating to the tarot cards. That being said, no one is forcing surgery on this child. We're paying attention to things that they have initiated that look like they're going a certain way, and asking ourselves as a family, how are we going to deal with this to support this child being themselves? Surgery, hormones, those types of things, those aren't decisions you make typically, from what I understand, trans people I have known, until they are adult. And there's a quite extensive process that people go through to even have that approved. And I'm going from someone who didn't quite understand this phenomenon to someone who just more recently has exposure to it. Okay, right. I'm not saying I'm pro this. I'm just saying when a child requests to be called by a boy's name and wants to only wear boyish clothes, and they're signs that they're initiating. I don't feel like anyone's putting it on them. So the jury's out. They are still very young, but I just ask that, maybe we can continue part of this conversation off the YouTube channel. I think it's better to, if you want to learn about these things, maybe learn from a transgender person, because I'm not transgendered. I don't know what that's like, Yeah. But I was just talking about, these are manifestations also, though, of things that are going on within us as a society. I mean, we
surely they are
naturally feminine. See women who are naturally masculine.
We can all agree on that, certainly. And I think none of us are talking about in concrete biological terms either. I think at least the comment that I made, and I think I can speak for everybody else on this, is just that we're saying, it's a concept in Jungian psychology
Mhm.
that is oddly now being played out in materiality. That is just,
Yes.
it's a peculiarity.
I just think all I'm trying to point out though is because the assumption is that people are either male or female, and the assumption is that everyone's heterosexual. That's sort of how, that's a society that we've grown up in. So I'm just highlighting that that's not everyone's actual lived experience. That's what I'm trying to say.
Yeah, and especially in this card, sexuality and gender are both fluid, and
Mhm.
especially sexuality. I think when you allow yourself to experience other things, you realize that sometimes a label, it's just a label, you know. And I know what repercussions have in society, like. In terms of civil rights, you have to have a label to actually get a right and to fight for something. But in an individual process, everything's fluid, you know. So it's kind of like there's two sides of that.
It's like we used to think that people who heard voices were demonic, and now we understand that as schizophrenia. You know, in Native American, in indigenous communities, there have been non-binary people who were revered, you know, who are considered to be more like gods or more integrated as individuals. So all
Right,
I'm trying to say,
and let's be careful there, because you know, everybody hears voices, okay, and that doesn't necessarily mean you're mentally ill, okay,
right.
and um, and so I want to be very careful about these sorts of issues.
I appreciate that. I was
Because this is not intended to in any way be a mental health site per se. Okay,
Yeah.
none of us, I think, are professional mental health professionals.
No, I'm not.
And so, you know, I could say as a layman, you know, let somebody who wants to try out something try it out. Okay, it might turn out to be a mistake, and mistakes are good because you learn from them. And so, as I was saying earlier, when I interviewed people, I said, "What's the biggest mistake you ever made?" And if they give me some little tiny mistake, then I know either they're lying or they haven't had much of a life yet. And you know, I prefer to have seaworthy people working for me who
I was just
have made
trying,
mistakes.
I was just trying to say that things are taboo until they are accepted. And if you look at the history of the world, there have been things that have been demonized that people have been killed about. Tarot's an example. Tarot's an example, and that are now normal. And even
well, not yet. I'm trying to make it more normal. I can tell you.
Yeah, well, even people get afraid of tarot. So that's all I'm trying to say. From our point of view, it's like with my nephew, it's showing me more about the family and people's personalities than about the kid. They're just being themselves, trying stuff, and it's us who are like, oh, how do we deal with this? And I want to give an example also that women used to be called hysterical when they wanted, the women who wanted voting rights, the women who stood up to husbands could be sent to an insane asylum because they weren't fitting the yin. They weren't being yin enough. They were presenting with yang. So they were crazy. And the same thing, they even did that with slaves. There's a category that left the DSM, but it was called drapetomania. And this was something they would diagnose slaves who had run away from slavery to say they're crazy because they're not feeling their natural, docile African inferior nature. So I'm not against psychiatry or anything like that. I'm just saying we evolve as a society. And I think
we do.
There's a reason this is happening. There's a reason the collective unconscious is pushing this phenomenon of what is non-binary and trans forth. And it's for all of our benefits, even if we don't see it yet, why this is happening.
Samantha, it's great you brought that up with the DSM, the diagnostic standards of psychiatry for psychological disorders, because even until the DSM-3, homosexuality was listed as a disorder.
Mm-hmm.
So there's some modern culture in editing and how even the slow moving pieces can be updated, which is again a scene through the trickster, and how long you see through the devil until you can actually act.
Yeah,
And
but that's also it's also been shown that with the DSM, every time that they update it or add some new disorder or remove another disorder, that numbers expand as they establish something. So it's almost just like once a diagnosis is achieved for something like, I think somewhere like bulimia was never a diagnosis, and then it became a diagnosis, and then it tripled.
Well, no, I disagree with that. I don't think it tripled. I think people realized, they identified that it was happening, and people were diagnosed with it. I don't think people say, "Oh, wow, I'm going to try." I mean, I know young girls can copy it, but I don't think something happened just because it's identified.
Yeah,
right.
They've been underdiagnosed.
It's certainly multifaceted, and that's definitely a facet of it. But the same thing has happened with suicide in places too, like in places like Seattle. And also it's been shown that when celebrity suicide gets covered more, people are more influenced to commit suicide.
Oh, definitely that. Yeah, but I don't think like in when you say that, I used to work in mental health, so when you discover and psychiatrists see that people are going through this suffering, and they decide, we've seen these people, and we decided to put the DSM-3. I don't think it just, there's a lot more bogus cases up there. I think it shines a light on, this is a problem, and people come out and say, yeah, I have that problem too. So I don't think it creates something. People identify saying, I've been struggling with it. So
okay, so the devil is in the details, and we're going to go back to the cards because we're trying to give people a sense of what these cards mean. And we're not trying to solve mental health problems here.
Thank you, though, Nancy.
I didn't fix it.
And thank you, Nancy, for your comment. But whenever we start to get too far on this tangent, or in my other groups, when people start to talk about dreams, I say, no, that we're not talking about that.
Right.
If you want to talk about dreams, you go talk to a mental health professional. You don't talk to me. Okay.
Thank you for letting me explore that. I just want to say I realize I took a lot of airtime, and I appreciate it.
Okay, so very quickly, I'm going to let Jordan tell about his card, and then I quickly want to show you the other cards that I've teed up tonight that all relate to the devil, so that you can refer to them later on and see the difference. So first, I'm going to give Jordan his card, and I'm sorry, Jordan, but I'm going to excuse myself for a bio break.
Oh, that's fine. So everyone here, if you would, notice, I think most prominently, they're both kind of tricking him. He's kind of got this, and she's offering the grapes. He's kind of juggle kicking the fire, but the fire is the tip of his tail. So in a sense, and the grapes for the wine back is the tip of her tail. So as you also notice, the umbilicals feeding life blood into the structure. So both of their energies, the anima and the animus, the masculine and the feminine. So what I'd like to do is I'm going to read this is a longer paragraph, but it's relatively short, from my book that goes, the Imagination Primer book that goes with my deck. And ambition can be frightening and dangerous. It is also less frightening and dangerous, though, than idle hands. Action must be taken. And then I go into the devil actually speaking in the first person. And he says, let me tell you about myself from my intense perspective. By myself, I am like a goat. If you've ever been in a goat pen, you already know this. Look me in the eye, and 4 seconds, 5 seconds later, bam, I will run over and butt you with my horns. Goats are about full-on ego and pecking order. Fortunately, though, that is not all of me. Those two people here do not tell me their names. They are visiting, and they are visiting from temperance right before me. they add another dimension to my identity. You see, between her on the left and him on the right, they have tempered my goat ego. You will see tempering further with your swords. My goat ego is primal. It tries to establish hierarchies. Hierarchies are pecking orders. With those two here, though, my ego realizes that pecking and headbutting does not create much good order, or at least order that feels to last very long. You see, those two visit from temperance and are really like my hands. They came to show me my earthly desires in action. I'm grateful that I was able to arrive in Mysterium after temperance. That way, I could be amazed to receive the gift of my desires in action. My ego simply arranges and places things now. The couple from temperance are here to guide me and activate my placements. Thoughts on this card? It's relatively similar to the Rider-Waite in structure.
I'm glad you included the phallus there, right in the forecard. I don't know if that was intentional or not, but I think it's really
That's just
it works well for yeah, maybe so. I think it works well for the symbolism, just because, you know, what does the phallus birth? Just more matter and more matter and more matter.
And I made it into I've abstracted it. It's an obelisk. So it's a structure that has been created from the lifeblood. And as you see, the top is red. The rest of it is more the melanized. And if you see also the devil's got his fingers. You see the one golden fingernail scratching a hole in time. You see opening up the night behind her, and actually almost opening himself up to see his transparency, that the night is behind him, and then this shadow of the other one under the male's foot.
Yeah, it kind of reminds me of the Crowley card a little bit.
Yeah. Okay, I because you mentioned that, I think I ought to pull up
I'm scared.
Melissa Townsend's cards.
And there's something that's coming back to me that I meant to mention earlier, but it got lost in some other thoughts. But I think it's somebody who's talking about the integration of shadow and the whole idea that, you know, we have to really incorporate both our capacity for good and our capacity for evil, and that whole idea. And we can certainly all agree on that. But I think it's really interesting too to note how, particularly somebody like Aleister Crowley, you know, like a couple of talks ago, Samantha said something about Crowley was a Satanist and this and that. And I emphatically disagreed with that, just because it's not that I'm a defender of Crowley or a Crowley apologist or anything like that. Not even a super huge fan of the guy, but I think it's very interesting that he actually was very into things that have to do with the Kabbalah, with God, with, you know, Christianity and stuff like that. I mean, he was definitely not a Christian in the conventional sense of the word, but, you know, people think that he was this devil worshiper and all of this, and he was really just an impossibilist and really just liked to mess with people. And he realized that it was to his great benefit that people thought all of this stuff about him. And he's quoted as saying, "For the people that are afraid of the things that they say about me, my teachings are not for those." And he's really just playing this trickster role. But I think it's very interesting that tons of wise men and probably wise women throughout the ages have a very similar characteristic. I mean, people, you know, we're all fond of Jung, but, you know, to a lot of people, Jung seemed like a very, very similar character. You know, people called him a heretic, and, you know, tons of people in Christianity in his country thought he was the devil. So, you know, I think it's just interesting.
Well, he would have been burned at the stake 300 years ago.
Yeah, and I just think it's so interesting how so many of these people have that kind of slippery character that if you don't know enough about them, you think like, is this guy questionable? But, you know, when you really understand the teaching, you realize that was just me. That was me putting my evil onto that person.
Right. Projecting contents. And that's, again, a bad expectation, is the externalizing of your projections. And that's another thing with this, I think Colleen mentioned it. With this card is a big smack billboard. It says male and female, and spectrums of both. And we're all uniquely complete beings. We have different mixtures of masculine and feminine.
Men and women came from each other literally in the early Bible mythology.
Actually, they came from the clay, but Eve didn't come from the clay. Eve came from a rib. Lilith was the original woman, and she came from the clay. Same clay as Adam.
We're one. That's all. That's all I meant. We're from the same.
Oh yeah, and the body has to actually differentiate to become a male. It starts inherently as female, and I think it actually, the first thing to form is the anus. So for a while, we're all kind of,
Never mind.
We're all just a-holes.
No.
I'm not going to say it.
No,
I'm sorry. I'm on fire tonight.
Bad
Skip.
biology joke. So
yeah, that's
this card. Take a look, everyone, at this card, because this card is so simply done, and it still carries all of those pieces.
Yeah.
I mean, a foot on the ground, a foot in the air. Turning to the left, but the wings are on the right. I mean,
this is the Deviant Moon deck.
Right.
And
it seems like this deck is suited for this card.
Oh yeah, the whole deck's like a lead up. This card is so carnival. I mean, this is one of my favorite decks.
That's my favorite card in that deck. I haven't been a huge fan of that, to be honest. Sometimes I like the writing, but not the guidebook, but I don't like the image, but I actually find that image kind of beautiful.
Yeah, it kind of looks like they're all the devil.
Well, it almost feels like Tim Burton has a brother. It's like
the author. The less favored brother of Tim Burton or something.
Right.
Let's see if is Nicole still here? Yes, Nicole's still here. I wanted to share with you, and Nicole shared with me some of her work toward a death card.
Nice.
This is a different.
Yeah.
This is a different topic, but since I have it here, I want to share it with you.
Well, we can make it on topic by saying creativity is devilishly delicious.
Right, and Nicole, if you dare to uncloak, you're welcome to talk about this.
Yeah, sure. Oh gosh. Just back to the devil.
Yeah, okay.
What came up was when you were all talking, because I got really tired, and what came up, just I don't know whether it's sort of was relevant to something Jordan said, but it was bad things happen. It's not and it's in relationship to abuse.
Mm-hmm.
And it is that it's not happening to you, it's happening for you. And I know that that's controversial and a real paradigm shift. But if you can work through that, you can get a lot of insight into the evil inside of you and why it's happening in the external world. And I haven't got the whole piece of it, but that's just the thing. Like, yeah.
Okay.
And my image, I just I actually thought that I could put a horse. I wanted to put. Hang on, sorry, I wanted to put the horse in it. But I thought about taking him off the horse and having him lying down like that, and that having the horse there, but somehow behind. And I'm having a great time at the moment looking at different artwork and seeing a lot of tarot symbology
in
artwork. It's not actually tarot, but it's amazing how it really resonates, and because they are these archetypal themes, and that image has always really resonated to me. This is a really old diary that I had from like 10, 20 years ago, and I started working on black. I've got black books myself.
Uh-huh.
This is beautiful.
I think,
Yeah,
Nicole,
so
your imagery is the form giver of taking him off the horse and putting the horse behind is a wonderful tarot verb, because for death, because you've taken that which he is moved by, that which he rides, his living force that moves him forward, you've taken him off of it. So in a sense, you've removed the action. That's very, very much a death form giver. That's strong.
Yeah,
I look forward to seeing you move it forward.
If you guys,
I just love this whole. I'm really going deeper into symbolism and understanding. That's what's really great about this, is seeing the different cards through time, because the Starman deck is just so multi-dimensional, layered, and the language of it and how it speaks to how we can reimagine. Like I've got this really powerful thing of reimagining, which is part of this group too, because I used to always be a bit dependent or a bit sort of under the, like a little bit behind myself in terms of, what can I create? Now I'm like, oh my God, I can create anything.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely.
Nicole,
and the only problem I've got, my technology the technology that I have isn't holding everything that I've got. So my plan is because I work on a Mac, but I'm going to put all my Word documents onto the PC and then have the Mac for artistic stuff. And that way I don't get confused, because it's getting really, I'm creating too many files and it's just getting crazy.
Yeah,
I lose
you're
things.
telling me I literally have 1 million files on my.
oh my
Mac.
God.
I have a big
Oh my
Mac.
God.
But
Yeah, Nicole thought she had it bad.
yeah.
1 million
Okay.
files.
All
Hey,
right,
Nicole,
so
if you want to see some crazy artwork that parallels this card, look up Krampus Christmas artwork.
Krampus, this is artwork. Okay.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Okay.
All
All right.
right.
I want to start drawing this conversation to an end. It's been very effulgent talking about devil, but I do want to give credit to the various cards that I've been sort of giving you peeks at as
Can we take a look at that Splendor Solace card?
Okay, let me come back to that in a minute. I'll give that one to yes. Okay, but this is the Jungian Tarot. So this is Robert Wang, and I'm not going to read all of these cards to you, but this is very short, so I thought it would be worth giving it to you since it's Robert Wang. Okay, Devil Capricorn, archetype of the shadow, material force, steadfastness, control over the material condition, which is at once thoughtful and serious, diplomacy, extreme conventionality, caution and frugality, only science is taken seriously, religions, intuitions, and psychisms are considered to be nonsense. Okay, so that's what he said, for what it's worth.
That's interesting about the religions piece being nonsense. That goes right with David Bowie's quote,
Yeah, I bet. Okay, now Nick, you wanted to see which one? You wanted to see Splendor Solace.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, just a minute. I got to find it here. I know I have it here somewhere. Well, it's in the layers, so let me.
I saw you pull it up on the slide with 4 just a second ago.
Yeah, well, there are 4 slides with 4, so I'm getting too many tarot decks actually. Okay,
That's not possible. You can't have too many tarot decks. Oh, come on. Don't be so silly.
Yeah, okay, fine. All right, well, this is I really like the 5th tarot card here too. This is the shadow from the 5th tarot, and it's really quite beautiful. And I thought Patricia would appreciate that. But the Splendor Solus is the peacock, and I did bring that Splendor Solus book in, so I suppose I could read that so you understand what it is about.
It's the Cauda Pavonis.
Pardon?
I think it's. I imagine that it will say something about the Cauda Pavonis in the writing here. We'll see.
Right.
I'm not sure about
that serpent. The card in the bottom left is that's just kick ass. That's the only way I can describe that image. It's so intensely beautiful.
It's intense, all right. That's from the Tarot of the Divine.
Yeah, that's beautiful.
Just a minute here.
Snake in that is the butterfly and the snake. It's really
it's just yes, completely.
Okay, Alchemy of the Devil. So we're talking about this one right now. So I'll pull it. Let me pull it down. Oh shoot, that didn't work. It's trying to
click off of the image. I should get rid of that selection. There you go.
There we go. All right. Okay, so this is the card that we're talking about, and this is from the Splendor Solus Tarot. I am the peacock, inner alchemy of the devil, lord of the gates of matter, child of the forces of time. I am life's positive and most misunderstood power. I come to help you challenge ugly reversals of beautiful material powers, restoring them to forces of delight and creation. I am artisan of the renewing intelligence, aligning creative processes with divine creation. To renew all the changing things, all Sun-Mercury experiences in the 4 worlds are woven into my alchemical path. I am the radiant inward vision of life lived forwards, not lived backwards, which merely spells devil. My many colored peacock's tail rises under Venus skies of bright Lucifer, the light bringer, whose alchemy transforms goatfoot ignorance to golden age radiance in the garden of delights. See my 1,000 shimmering eyes reveal the right use of love's generative powers. Dear alchemist, only those who can quicken the soul will see its color, but this steam must rise up. Allow kindly mirth into your life. Lift the pantomime chains. Look forward, away from dogma, to divine intelligence. Through me, the great raw powers of creation are developed into those skillful arts by which blissful love, culture, and civilization flourish upon the earth. Okay, so that's what they say. Let me see here. I do have.
I think the Cauda Pavonis more or less just is similar to the magnum opus of alchemy. It's just the idea that the work is completed, symbolized by the colors in the peacock's tail.
And so this is a Brazilian tale. So this is for you, Raquel. This is Boitata. It's from Brazilian mythology, according to this. And this is from from Beneath the Moon, which is the book for the Tarot of the Divine. And so this is the story. Legend has it that long ago, there once was a night that did not end. Deep in the Amazon forest, the night went on, lasting days and weeks and months. In this darkness, the people began to starve because they could not grow crops for food. It was too dark to see anything, too dark even to chop wood to make into torches to burn. It became oppressive, and all the animals and people began to grow scared. Then it began to rain. The rain went on and on with no end in sight. The forest began to flood, and many of the animals and people, weak with hunger and cold, drowned in the endlessly rising waters. It was then that a huge snake, sleeping on a log deep in the forest, woke from its slumber. It woke feeling very hungry. It slithered easily through the wet forest because it knew how to swim and was accustomed to the darkness. It began to eat all the dead floating animals, filling its belly to bursting. Eventually, because there were so many animals, the snake was able to feast on only its favorite part, the eyes. The eyes of the animals gleamed bright with the light of the last rays of sun the animals had seen. So with each eye the snake swallowed, the brighter the snake itself became. It ate so many eyes full of light that it became fire, and with its brilliance banished the rain and the night and brought warmth back to the forest. The snake became known as the Boitata. Now the Boitata is considered a protector of the forests and fields. Its bright eyes can see perfectly in the dark, and it will kill anyone who tries to set fire to the forest, eating their eyes. Anyone who has the misfortune to see the snake will go blind, go insane, or even die. So,
Wow. Yeah.
do you remember that story from Brazilian mythology, Raquel?
Actually, I know the by name, you know, Boitatá is actually very common to us, but I did not know that was portrayed as a snake. I didn't remember that because the word boy, the initial part of the entire word, actually means bull, you know, like a Taurus, you know.
Yeah.
I didn't think that it was a snake in my head when I listened to the story. I never connected to a snake.
Interesting. Okay, so very quickly then, this is the fifth tarot, and that's quite an image, I must say. It's quite an impressive painting.
The composition of that with all the animals. I mean, the fox or bear, goat
there's a snake
in the temple. Yeah, and her up in the right or on to the left. It looks like a wolf. Yeah, like a wolf in the temple.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Okay, and there's a caterpillar there too, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
And so then this one is the Cosmic Tarot, which is the one I like to use when I'm doing a reading for our president. So anyway, okay. So
I like the Cosmic Tarot too.
So that's that group. Okay, I guess
it's like he's a man of wealth and taste.
Nice lyrics. Good comeback.
Okay, so here's
the
old traditional ones. Okay, so here's the Golden Dawn, and I think it's very interesting that this flame looks like a face here.
He's also got to be burning himself with that flame.
Right.
One would think. And then this is the Thoth deck. And as usual, the Thoth deck is quite complicated.
Well, and there's it's a phallus with two testicles and the life inside them, and it's penetrating the higher realms at the top.
Yeah, interesting.
Or penetrated into the higher realms.
Okay, and then this is the Marseille deck, of course, and interesting with the tongue sticking out here, and the hermaphrodite, of course, and
one thing that we didn't say either is that, and it's really brought to bear in all of these, is that every one of these figures is on a pedestal, but it's a very they could be blown off their pedestal very easily, particularly in the Rider-Waite deck. I mean, he's just barely got room to get his feet on there. You know, it's like you could blow some air on him and he would fall off.
Yeah, interesting.
Well, yeah, and that's that whole ego thing of how unstable it is to play King of the Mountain. I mean, you're the one at the top. Everyone's taking aim.
Yeah.
So, you know, you could, like you said, just straw broke the camel's back. You're right off tumbling down.
Right. Okay, so here's another one. I think we've covered those four. I mean, I didn't actually identify them, but I think we know what they are. Okay, so then this is the Mythic Tarot here. Yeah. This is Liz Green's deck. And of course, here we have Pan for sure. And then this is the Line Strider deck here. And
it's beautiful the way the Line Strider has the male and the female bound together as one.
Yeah. Yeah, and the Spirit Song Tarot has the Jackal here, and she has self-empowerment and ambition, the Shadow, and this is the Jackal. So this is a person who has ambition. Okay, boy, they're terrible, right? And then this is the Super Raibito, I think that's what they call it. She calls it.
What's interesting about the ambition piece too
Sasu Raibito.
Sasu Raibito. Yeah. I mentioned this in my book with ambition, that ambition can be intense and it can be scary and terrifying, but it's less terrifying than idle hands. So kind of playing a joke back on the devil in idle hands. Action is the way to move it.
But interestingly, this artist is a relatively young woman, maybe, Samantha's age or younger. And so she sees the devil as a dark man in her life, a dark animus.
Well, and it had light and dark. Half the face was actually a quadranted face.
Right.
Yeah, I would hate to be that guy. But I think it's interesting.
He could shave and then he wouldn't be anymore. But
yeah, I think it's interesting that card says empowerment and ambition. And I generally try to stay away from terms like empowerment because I feel like it's a term that's kind of subject to a certain amount of misuse sometimes. Although, everybody obviously needs to feel empowered and so on, but it's something that's kind of taken it's kind of turned into more of a cultural moray than meaning.
It's lost it's certainly lost its meaning.
But I do think it's most interesting because, like somebody said earlier, I can't remember who pointed this out, but I think it was actually you, Nicole, rather than saying things happen to you, but they happen for you. And that to me seems like kind of an iteration of the same idea. Whereas if things happen to you, those chains are just on you. But if things happen for you, then those chains can come off, and they just really taught you a lesson in that time. But also the ambition thing. I mean, it seems like to me so much of the symbolism that has to do with Saturn has to do with inertia and stuckness and inhibition. And ambition is the opposite of that. I mean, ambition can definitely be very shocking. I know that I personally have a tendency towards extreme impatience when I'm feeling very ambitious or striving towards something, and I've definitely put people off. in that
Right.
sense before.
Well, and those loose chains go with that kind of off-putting in a way, because there's a tenuous connection that's created, like a loose chain, when
Mhm.
you're
Yeah.
kind of rattling your bars when you're being ambitious and being impatient and, push, push, push. And at the same time, you're also bringing things together.
Yeah.
So you get
Yeah.
more density and less space.
I think
Okay,
Tammy has
let's
something she
move
wants
on.
to say. I don't know
Who-
where
who
she's
did?
at. I see at the bottom of the screen here, Tammy Hanley has her hand raised, but I don't see her in the gallery.
I
I don't
don't
know.
see
She's
her.
raising a
She
hand out
made
of
a
the ether.
she made a comment on the YouTube chat, which is, or did God separate the whole into male and female, and the whole experience is to come back together?
Is she trying to join the chat and you haven't?
She said that I don't see me either.
Possibly, yeah. Just a minute. Just a minute.
I don't
Let
see
let
me either. What
Oh
a-
yeah, there she is. There she
Well,
is.
the eye can't see itself. How appropriate, Tammy.
Yeah.
I can't see me
See,
either.
I cannot.
Oh man,
I
that's
cannot see an arrival when I'm sharing a screen, unfortunately.
Tammy, that was grand
Yeah,
slam
so-
pun.
So we
Yeah, I'm
see
gonna-
we
I can't
see
see
you
myself
now.
either. That's
I'm
you get
not-
an award.
I'm gonna write that down.
Yeah, I
Okay,
can't
so
see
you
myself
have to
either.
unmute
Oh, boy.
Tammy, because we can't hear you. Tammy, we cannot hear you. Can't hear you. No.
Can you hear me now?
There you go.
Yeah.
Okay. There
Okay. I want to know if you think that the loss of the meaning of the word empowerment is primarily a male perspective.
I don't personally. I don't mean that it might be, but what I find is it's become a buzzword that people kind of concept drop with. That this is all about empowerment, and they're skimming the surface, because true empowerment is both masculine and feminine within. And for example, teaching women how to find their strength, teaching men how to find their strength, teaching both how not to be heavy-handed. I just find it's become almost slang in a way. So I value wholeheartedly the concept and techniques and things to bring empowerment, but it's used is just such a marketing adjective now rather than a core
I
thing.
agree with that. It's
So that's
just
my
that I never heard it when I was needing it. I didn't hear it until Me Too came along, and then I was like, oh, I could also have that power within me. So so it may not be as overused for women as, I mean, it's overused in general, but it may not seem as overused for women as it does for men who have had that power.
I just say that because I agree with what Jordan said. It's a term that has become monetized in a certain sense.
Yes.
But also I don't, in the same sense that I don't like to use words personally. I know this will probably be not how everybody thinks about things. I just don't like to use words that are overused and denigrate over time as a result of their overuse, much in the same way that people say literally almost every other sentence. I mean, you can't be speaking literally with every breath, so it doesn't
I'm
mean
an editor.
Well,
so the use of that term literally to describe something not literally,
You're right.
It drives me crazy.
The
But
editor in me
empowerment
is
new
actually
for me.
okay, because the editor in me, just from as a creator, architect, metaphysical fields, the new age, et cetera, 15 to 20 years ago, it's when this kind of started, the erosion of the word. 30 years ago, empowerment was like this, wow, we should do this. It's good for all of us. But then about 15 to 20 years ago, it started to become a bad Hallmark card. And it started to get kind of weak. So, that's just a one word. So,
okay, let's move back to this last bunch of
I
tarot
apologize.
cards. If you guys want to talk
that's-
about semantics, please do it in a private email conference between you.
Semantics, just semantics.
Yeah, I mean, it's all well and good, but it's not. It has no place here.
Thanks for joining us now, Tammy. I hope next time
Yeah,
you'll
but
join
we're
us a bit
glad you're
sooner.
here, Tammy. And
It
I
takes
think you
it.
came on once before, but I
Mhm.
I just wanted to make sure that I mentioned that this is the Hermetic Tarot, and it's a black and white tarot deck, but it's very detailed and it's in the presentation. And what I liked was the Lord of the Gates of Matter.
Mhm.
And
Yeah, that's
so,
why I was saying the phallus only generates more and more and more matter.
Right.
right. And so this is the Mystic Mondays Tarot, probably enough said.
And everyone too out there in this group and now people listening, Lord of the Gates of Matter, the whole Hermetic system has royal titles for every card in the deck. And for study and into the concepts of the cards, going to discover and find those titles is a worthwhile exercise. It can really inform your intuitions.
Yeah. Okay. Now, these two top cards are Melissa Townsend's cards. This is the one I got for my outcome card on that occasion. And you see the two little people down there. And this one is the one that she used to do in cafe readings in Greenwich Village. And I'll just leave it at that. It's I don't want to get banned by YouTube, so I'm gonna just leave it at that without further comment. Tammy,
Well,
go ahead. Tammy, go ahead.
I actually did a review on the Mystic Mondays, so I have the deck, and it's a very highly feminine deck.
Yes.
It's focused toward that, but it's also the concept of the Mystic Mondays is that Monday is like the start of a new week. It's like a fresh start.
Mhm.
And so this deck is to, no matter where you are, to have a fresh start. Pull the deck out, everything that's going on that's brought you down or whatever, you pull the deck out and you start fresh. And so very minimalistic, very new age digital art, but it does not have all the symbolism of a regular tarot deck. It's just the fresh start deck.
I think it's fine for the purposes that you say. I think it's probably very hard for newbies to use it for reading.
Yeah, I'm not crazy about it.
Yeah.
I just understand the concept behind it.
Well,
for example, I appreciate it, but doing tarot for 49 years, I mean, it's almost since way, way early. And I appreciate it as a visual verb because she's stripped it down to simply be those pieces to convey the idea, which is to me a strong artistic exercise. It's a little too simple for me from a taste perspective, but graphically what she's doing, I have actually a reverence for how simplified she boiled it down.
Yeah.
And it's still actually messages in a way that's clear. It just
right. And so the point we're making in this whole program for a year here or more is that these are ideas that are fundamental to the human species. They always have been and they always will be, and across every part of our species. And so the fact that they're referred to in these many different ways doesn't change the fact that they are archetypal and they're part of our psyche and our being. And they haven't changed for 600 years. And so for those reasons, they're worth understanding. And of course, the church that was trying to defend the collection plate did burn a lot of tarot readers at the stake, presumably, over the years. And
would still like to.
And probably still would like to, yeah.
Right.
I know that Paul Vanderklay's denomination has said stay away from Jung, and for them, the problem is that, you know, the old formula isn't working anymore. And so they need to upgrade it. They need to bring it up to modern categories of understanding. And part of that is to integrate this feminine side, which is what the tarot is. And, you know, of course, I'm displaying my feminine side in a way because of my interest in the tarot and the fact that I want to talk about these things. And it makes me a bit of a heretic, I suppose. But we have to integrate these things or we're not going to be able to live in peace. That's the point.
I think that there's something pretty interesting too about that. There's like an unpredictability component too when people have their own relationship to God and religion and their own experience of things like that.
Sure.
It brings to mind, I can't remember, it's from one of the Viking sagas or a documentary about Vikings or something, but I saw that there was this great warrior that was in the Vikings, and one of the younger men was talking about going into combat with him, or just somebody said, you don't want to have problems with this guy. He moves with the gods. And I just thought that was so striking, because they were essentially saying, like, if the gods tell this guy who's, you know, says he's your friend to strike you down, he'll do it because he has that relationship with the gods, and you don't control him. Something else controls him.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's the fear that comes up for a lot of people when people have their own relationship to God and religion and stuff. And I guess it's like the paraclete idea and the idea of the Holy Spirit operating outside of the church. But that's interesting about the Vanderklay guy. I didn't know that.
Well,
Yeah.
I think it's interesting to me too, Tammy, with the Mystic Mondays being so feminine. And for example, I mean, my deck, all the images are masculine, very yangy, but all the card backs are very yin, feminine. So to me, the combination was to open up to what's inside, to the brightness inside, and then it's not yang anymore. It's like a geode, in a way, where you're cracking open to see the treasured crystals inside.
Can see that.
Yep. Okay. Well, thank you very much, all. We had a fun romp with the devil.
Yeah, we're like Van Halen. We should have been running with the devil all the
Oh, for goodness sake.
Right.
R.I.P. Eddie.
It's nice to visit Australia on these evenings, Nicole, and see how you're enjoying your springtime. Because over here it's getting cold. I mean, this session almost didn't happen tonight because we had tornado warnings here, and
I've got 3 inches of snow on the ground.
Oh, you do? Wow.
Yeah, it was pouring huge thunderstorm tonight here.
Yeah.
We covered all of our plants and our burgeoning trees because it's going to be like 26 degrees tonight.
Oh, wow.
Where is that?
San Antonio.
In San Antonio. Oh my goodness.
I mean, for us, that's amazing.
Yeah, you guys got hit by that front. That's true.
Yeah.
My mom's in Houston. So that's.
Yeah. I've got family there.
Yeah.
We don't get cold weather. So
let me just mention that
that is rare.
In future, if I lose power, I mean, what happened tonight is I lost power entirely 1 hour before this session, and the power company said it was going to take 2 hours to get it back. And so what I will endeavor to do is to get the session started, and for a different reason, Jordan had to save the day for a while for me this evening because I had a different problem, and so you know, if you come online, I may make you a co-host so that you can keep the session going.
no pressure.
Yeah, I mean, assuming I can get it online. I mean, I have been able to get it online with my cell phone or with an iPad in the past.
I thought it was weird a couple of sessions ago. when there was a local transformer that went off and my power just shut down. I was sitting there with my phone, but I didn't lose the session. I mean, it was all dark, but then I had like my phone as a light.
Well,
So
yeah, your phone has its own power, though.
Well, but I was on my iPad, but the internet connection didn't leave. And I'm on a wireless router. So usually that was kind of odd.
Yeah,
but never mind, that's phone.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Whatever it is, it is. But
yeah, it probably was on battery backup, actually, now that I think about it.
Skip, where are you? I mean,
Annapolis,
Annapolis,
Maryland.
Maryland. Okay, thank you.
The capital of the state of Maryland, the home of the U.S. Naval Academy.
Okay.
And this is Carl Jung's house in
Oh, I
Switzerland.
wondered the significance of that background.
That's Valenza, which is the house that Carl Jung built with his bare hands, and it has no plumbing and no electricity. But it does have a lot of fine masonry in it.
It's
I have a place like that in South Texas. It's built by hand and no plumbing yet, no electricity, but we're working on it.
Interesting. Okay.
My cabin, Red River, is almost like that because it's four showers and into the tank. So
yeah.
Okay, so thank you everyone for joining tonight. This has been a 4-hour session, so I'm a little bit tired. And
thanks for hanging all the way in there.
Thank you everyone for joining us. Let's see, Brito Mart says, in the next session on the tower, and when will that be? Yeah, the next session will be the tower, and it will be next Monday at on YouTube. It's at 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time in the U.S. And so you'll have to interpolate that for wherever you are. And if you click on one of the links there in the YouTube channel, which I gave the link to register for our program, then you will receive my invitation to join the panel, and then you can join the panel. And so I urge people to do that, and we'll see if we can build up the panel. We seem to have a strong cadre of folks, and it's nice to have you join us tonight, Tammy and Colleen, of course, and Nicole is in here from Australia, and Raquel was here from Brazil, and Manuela was here from Argentina earlier. So
I have to ask one last question to Nicole. Several sessions ago, I didn't know if it was something that was on a computer program, but it looked like your house was spinning, like the outdoors. Are you in some kind of like mobile round? Because in one of your windows, the landscape was like just going by, like you were moving, and it was really. It was
all you, Jordan.
That's right.
Oh wow! Boom! Yeah.
I don't know.
But maybe it was anyway. So
yeah, that comes under the category of Bob Newhart's joke. What brand does he drink? And send a case of it to all the other generals.
It's been a powerful weekend. It's been a powerful weekend because there's been an eclipse. I think it was last night or something, but there's been a really powerful astrological thing happening. I've been sleeping in the tent just to be outside.
That's cool. Bask in the moon. Yeah.
Well, we got a lot more of that astrological stuff happening right up to
3 eclipses this month, and 3 eclipses this month, and today actually today Jupiter, Saturn, which took us out of trouble basically.
Say good night, Jordan.
Good night. I won't find it in my notes.
I'm sorry. I'm a little bit tired after 4 hours. So.
I gotta go find that case of Bob Newhart stuff.
Yeah, I'm in Yeah, I'm just an old party pooper, but anyway,
Oh,
it's been
Bye.
great to have you here.
great to
and
see you guys.
Thanks for joining
night.
us, Tammy
Night,
and
Cap.
Colleen and Nicole. Take care now. Bye
Sweet
bye.
dreams, everybody.
Yeah,
Oh, yeah.
let's sleep.
Good night.
Bye bye.